A thin frost blooms on a field of small potatoes laid carefully on woven mats. In the high Indian night, a barefoot farmer turns each tuber with a gentle press so the cold can do its quiet work. Welcome, whenever you're ready to drift off. Let your breath move slower and your shoulders soften. Tonight, as you settle in for the night, we'll visit for modest corners of the past. We will watch potatoes become chugo under moon and sun. We will sit in a silk reeling house where warm water and patient hands turn cocoons into thread. We will stand in a Dutch market where bells, ledgers, and careful carriers measure wheels of cheese. And we will walk down cool stone steps at a Rajasthani stepwell after dusk, where a rope, a bucket, and a lamp keep water near. The pace will be slow and sleep safe, simple words, soft detail, nothing sudden. You may notice the sound of frost under a heel, the whisper of thread through a porcelain eye, the light ring of a balance finding level, and the small echo that answers in a deep well. If thoughts arrive, let them pass like clouds. When your mind feels ready, we will begin where night air is a tool and a harvest learns to last. The first work is to spread the potatoes. The field is a flat, breath-wide place at high altitude, level as a woven cloth laid on the earth. Reed mats lie in tidy rows, their edges pinned with small stones so the night wind does not play with them. Each mat holds a family's careful heap. The tubers are small, no bigger than a closed fist, with skins the color of ash, milk, or a faint purple dusk. They were dug from cool soil just days ago. Today they rest above ground, waiting for dark to do what only dark can do here. The air at this height is thin and clean. When evening comes, it comes with a clear promise. The sky opens wide and lets the day's heat escape. The family knows the pattern well. They talk softly while they work. A mother smooths a mat with her palm. A father checks the small fences of each grass that keep dogs and curious alpacas away. A grandparent hums an old song that marks the steps of the task. A child carries a gourd ladle, the rim chipped smooth by years of use, and fetches a sip of spring water for each person before the sun slips behind the ridge. Clothing is simple and warm. Woven mantis, thick with smoke memory, sit on shoulders. Hats sit low. Sandals answer with a faint hiss on the dry ground. The smell of evening is clean dust, straw, and the last breath of the sun on rock. A pot of barley drink cools under a cloth near a low wall. Next to it rests a clay jar of coarse salt and a small twist of herbs that cheer the mouth. Work begins with a small prayer that is more like a greeting to the mountain and the night. The first night is to freeze. Each potato is placed so air can touch it on all sides. Fingers move quick but gentle, turning a rough harvest into an orderly pattern. When the last light slides away, cold slips in. It does not creep, it settles, sure and steady. A thin white skin forms on the water bowl. Breath shows clean as quiet smoke. The family steps back. They look once across the mats, lines neat as a loom. Then they go home to sleep while the night works for them. Before dawn the world is very still. A bird calls once. A dog shifts and decides to rest again. The stars hang sharp. Frost shines on each small potato, a dusting that makes them look like sleeping stones. There is a reason Chugo belongs to this place. Highland, clear sky, dry air. The three together make a gentle machine that needs only patience. The people arrive with the first gray light. They walk softly, so they do not tell the frost to leave too soon. The next work is pressing. Bare feet are best for this part. Shoes would be too rough. Each person steps onto a mat and feels for a potato with the ball of the foot. A careful press sends the ice and some water up through the sky. The pressure is firm but kind. The heel does not grind. The toes do not twist. It is a steady push until the small body softens and sighs. The mark it leaves is like a star or a small flower. When done right, the potato keeps its shape but loses its hurry. A child tries the motion and laughs at the cold kiss on the sole. An elder smiles and says softer. The second try is right. Pressing makes rhythm. Press, shift, press, step. The sound is a thin crunch, then a damp whisper as ice escapes. Hands help too. A thumb and forefinger straighten the skin. A palm turns a tuber to face the rising sun. Now the sun belongs to the job. The family waits while light becomes warmth. The frost brightens, then loosens, then vanishes. Drops gather on the mat like little beads. They find the reeds and slide away. The air smells faintly sweet and starchy, like new bread thinking about rising. When the sun grows friendly but not strong, the rinsing begins. A child carries the gourd ladle again. Spring water moves from bowl to bowl. Each potato is dipped or flicked. The rinse washes away the last bitterness. This is not waste, this is taste training. The water that runs off dark is poured at the field's edge, a small offering to the soil that gave the harvest. In some places a twig of a clean-smelling plant is brushed over the rows, not to change the food, only to invite good patience into the work. By late morning the mats are a worn table. Now the sky does the next part. The thin air and the sun together pull water up and away. It is a rise you cannot see except in the way each tuber grows lighter in the hand. The family eats a small meal in the shade, the dense maize cake, a piece of cheese, a few olives traded last week, or a strip of dried meat that is chewed slowly with care. A clay cup passes hand to hand. Everyone drinks. There is no rush. Drying is not a race. It is a conversation, and the sun should never feel shouted at. As time passes, the potatoes change. They rattle little when moved. Their skins wrinkle into maps of tiny rivers and paths. A sling, woven from soft fiber, holds a test handful. The mother lifts it and feels the weight. Not yet, she says kindly. Another day and night will teach them a quieter heart. The elder nods and points to a row where shadows arrive early. Those need the front place tomorrow. Nothing in the process is hard, but everything is exact. The knowledge lives in bodies, not books. It is kept by memory and shared by doing. In the afternoon, a wind arrives that knows how to behave. It does not toss. It walks through the field like a friend, and the mats breathe under it. Dusk tries to come but meets a soft fence of grass. A little boy sits near the edge and braids a spare reed into a ring. He sets it like a crown on one potato as if to say, "You are the king of this mat today." A sister draws a line with her finger in the dusty crust at the field's edge and pretends it is a river. Her line leads to a tiny pool where a beetle pauses to drink. The day has room for small games beside the work. Late light warms the faces, then tips away. The family gathers the mats into tighter rows for the second night. Another freeze will make the hearts of the tubers still and sure. The people carry emptied baskets now, so that tomorrow they can carry something lighter than food and heavier than hunger, the comfort of stored days. At the doorway of the house, a small fire waits with a quiet tongue. A pot of soup breathes steam. Hands wash in a wooden bowl. The eldest person stands in the doorway and looks back at the field. The stars begin to write their familiar words across the sky. The work is not done, but it is well begun, and that, too, is a kind of rest. The second dawn comes with the same clean hush. The field holds steady, as if night itself had placed a hand over the land and said, "Be still." Frost crusts the edges of mats and makes the reeds shine like silver threads. A thin moon tarries in the west. The family steps out in twos, then all together, wrapped against a bite. They do not speak at first. There is a small courtesy in letting the morning keep its quiet shape. When the light is no more than a pale thought, the elder tests the frost with the side of a foot. It crunches like a thin wafer, then gives. That is the cue. Everyone leans to their own row. The pressing begins again, slow and even. A heel finds a tuber, a careful weight settles, a soft release as more ice escapes. You can hear the difference now. Yesterday's potatoes were solid underfoot. Today they feel willing, as if the cold has taught them how to be handled. Each press leaves a faint star, points not sharp but rounded like a flower after rain. A small boy copies the elder's pace, heel to toe, a tiny dancer on a pale floor. His sister follows, checking that every potato sits with its face to the growing warmth. Where skins have torn, a gentle thumb smooths them closed, not to hide the seam, only to keep the shape kind. Hands and feet move in a pattern that is almost a song. If you watched from a ridge, you would see the family pass like slow water across the mats, leaving order behind them. By the time the sun clears the far ridge, everyone has worked once through their rows. The frost loosens and lifts. A wisp of steam no more than breath rises from the mats and vanishes into the thin air. The elder shakes a reed fence to shrug off dew. The mother fetches the water gourd from its shady nest behind a stone. She pours a little over her palm, lets it run over her fingers, and flicks the drops across a row with a practiced snap. The water does not soak, it brightens. This small wet keeps the skin supple as the day warms. A child tries the flick and sends a comic splash into his own sandal. The laughter is small and soft, a bubble that pops and then is gone. Now drying begins in earnest. The sun climbs, not hurried, not lazy, a steady worker. The air is thin and dry, it pulls water to itself the way wool pulls burrs. The potatoes start to grow feather-light inside their skins. You cannot see weight go, but you can feel it when the mother lifts a tuber and weighs it in her hand like a fruit that has learned to float. The surface wrinkles, but not harshly. It is the wrinkling of a face smiling. There is a second task today, keeping watch. Birds love a plain of pale things. They will land, look, and peck from simple curiosity. The family respects bird hunger, but salt and winter belong here too. A boy ties a string of small reed rattles between two sticks and plants them with a firm twist. When wind steps through, the reeds whisper dry music. A girl powders a little ash onto the earth just beyond the mats. It makes a soft boundary the birds prefer not to cross. None of this is scolding. It is a conversation with wings. By mid-morning, heat on the crowns of hats says it is time to rest and watch. The family sits at the edge of their work and eats. The meal is quiet and good. A folded cloth opens to show a flat bread with seeds pressed into the top, a wedge of cheese wrapped in a leaf, a few dried peppers softened in water, and draped like small flags across the bread. A pot of tea that is not tea at all, leaves from a mountain plant that carries a clean scent, pours into clay cups. Cups are held with both hands to warm the fingers. The conversation is practical and kind. Which mat dries faster? Which row should move to the front after midday? Where will the wind come from when the sun leans west? The elder answers by pointing with his chin. The others nod, seeing the same map. After eating, work turns to turning. Not every potato needs it every hour. A hand tests, a hand decides. The ones that feel damp underneath are rolled so the other side can drink sun. The ones already light can keep their posture. A few are moved from shade to sun, a few are moved back to avoid a strong glare. The order of mats shifts like a simple puzzle whose pieces know where to go as soon as a finger nudges them. A child carries a small basket of stones to weight a wrinkled corner. Each stone has a familiar place. The stones do not mind their jobs. In the afternoon, the field's voice changes. In the morning, the sound was frost and foot. Now drying speaks. If you listen, you might hear the faintest rattle when a row is shaken, like seeds in a paper envelope. The mother takes a sling and seats 10 potatoes in its cradle. She swings it gently, a pendulum of pale ovals. The sling whispers. She looks at the elder. He nods. Ready for the next stage, he says, which means ready to be gathered toward shade before the night comes, so they will not freeze too hard and crack. This is where the knowing lives, in the timing of shade. Gathering is not bagging, not yet. The potatoes are nested in shallow baskets lined with reed. The baskets sit in thin shade under a low wall, so the day can finish its work without asking the night to begin too soon. A girl strokes a basket with the back of her hand and says soft. A boy leans his ear to the basket and says quiet thunder. He means the dry, low sound of many light things breathing together. While the baskets rest, the family tends the tools. Mats are shaken gently, then smoothed back into place for tomorrow. The reed fences are set a hand's width closer. The water gourd is refilled at the spring. The pressing places where feet stood most are brushed with a bundled twig to lift the flattened reeds. A small apology to the mats is spoken, half joking, half true. The mats are friends and deserve thank yous. As shadows lengthen, a visitor eyes a cousin from a nearby house, carrying a pouch of salt from a hollow in the far ridge. The pouch is sealed with a not only one way. He aunties it, and the family tastes a grain. The elder balances a pinch on the back of his thumbnail and gives it the tip of his tongue. He nods, pleased. Salt and chugo keep company in jars. Salt is not needed in the making, but it will sit like a quiet guard above the stored food, drawing out any damp that tries to return. The cousin leaves with a handful of fresh greens from the family's garden, a fair trade between seasons. The elder decides to begin a small experiment on one basket. He asked for a shallow stone basin. In it, he places water scented with a crushed leaf that smells clean. A few of the nearly dry potatoes take a quick bath, no more than a few breaths, then are set again on a mat in a lighter sun. This quick bath is not to re-wet, it is to invite the last bitterness out, to coax the taste toward mildness. There are different styles of chugo, and families tend their own preferences. Some keep the potatoes very dark and strong, others lighter and milder. The basin step is a small way to teach the final flavor without hurrying the body. Evening returns with a familiar cool. The family lifts the baskets and returns the nearly finished chugo to their mats for one more kiss of frost. The mats are closer together now, a village of pale ovals under a sky that begins to fill with old friends, stars that have watched this work for 1,000 winters. Before they leave, the mother places a clay jar at the edge of the field. Inside is a smooth stone, a few dry sprigs of herbs, and a pinch of salt. It is a small altar, quiet and low, a way of telling the land, we see you, we keep your company, we will be careful. Back at the house, the evening's jobs are plain. A pot goes on the fire. Water hisses when a handful of dried greens meets the boil. A shred of last year's chugo breaks into the pot, softens, and thickens the broth, teaching today what tomorrow will taste like. Bread warms on the hearthstone. A child rubs a gourd with ash to make it shine again. Another child oils a sandal strap with a thumb's worth of grease saved for just such care. In the corner, a woven sack waits clean, mended, a quiet promise that when the chugo is finished, there will be a safe place to keep it. Before sleep, the elder steps outside. He listens to the plane. It answers with very little, which is exactly right. The stars feel near enough to count. The mats are a pale geometry under thin light. A fox calls far off and receives no reply. The elder breathes once, then again. He thinks of winters past and winters to come. Food that keeps is another kind of fire. He closes the door, and the latch rests with a small wooden kiss. The third morning arrives like a familiar visitor, the kind who taps softly and waits. Frost has written its fine script again along the mat edges, and the pale ovals rest with a look of easy patience. The family moves with the same careful rhythm, yet there is a small difference now. The work has begun to answer back. When a heel presses, the give is lighter. When a hand turns a tuber, it lifts as if it remembers the gesture and wishes to help. They begin with a circuit of the field. The elder walks the boundary, touching each reed stake as if greeting an old friend. He checks the rattles and tightens one with a neat knot. The mother counts the baskets in shade, running a finger along each rim to be sure no burrs have caught the weave. The children fetch the gourd, not hurrying, pouring a thread of water along the first row. The drops purl and vanish, leaving the softened shine. Everyone knows where to start. The days a loom, and they are its shuttles. Pressing begins again, heel and toe, not with force, but with weight that knows its work. The elder hums under his breath. It is not a tune with words. It is the even sound of breath paced to effort. The children echo in, their lighter steps making a second line of music. A neighbor appears at the field's far corner, lifting a hand in greeting, and goes on to her own mats. Across the plain, other families are doing the same. If you could rise like a hawk and look down, you would see a gentle geometry of people and mats, a quiet pattern laid over earth and air. With the sun a hand above the ridge, the elder gathers the family at the experiment basin. The tubers that took their quick bath yesterday are ready to taste. He selects one, closes his hand around its wrinkled body, and breaks it with a slow twist. The halves show a dry heart, faintly pale. He passes a piece to each person. They do not bite, they let the piece sit on the tongue, learning it. The mother nods mild. The elder agrees. For this batch, the basin will be used again, but only for the ones that seem to want it. The others may stay strong and dark, a flavor remembered for soups that need spine. Work widens as the sun climbs. A new task begins, rubbing. The mother demonstrates, placing a nearly finished potato in both hands and rolling it gently, ponds like slow stones in a river. The motion loosens a thin, papery skin that has gone brittle with the cold, dry dance. When the skin peels, the tuber underneath feels like dry fruit, firm, weightless, clean. The children take turns, their small hands learning pressure and release. A wicker tray collects the spent skins, a drift of husks that smell faintly of earth and rind. These husks will not be wasted. They will feed the small fire that warms tea when midday comes. By late morning, the air has the clear, empty feel of high-altitude sunshine. Shadows shrink. The elder lifts a sling and weighs it by feel. The load is lighter than yesterday by almost a third. His hands tell him, and he trusts them more than any beam scale. Still, there is a measure to make. He has a cord with knots tied at an arm's length, one knot for each day that Chugo has crossed between frost and sun. He ties the next knot now snug and neat. The cord hangs from a peg near the tool basket, a small calendar in a language the field understands. A small rest, then food. Today the meal is warm, a thin broth thickened with a crumble of last year's chugo, seasoned with a pinch of mountain herb and a quiet slice of dried pepper. A clay cup of tea sits in a ring of twisted reeds so that will not scorch the mat. The family eats. Together, bowls nested in palms. They talk of simple things, the way the light looks on the distant snow, whether the neighbor's herd will pass this way tomorrow, how many baskets will be ready for storage by the fifth dawn. The elder says the weather feels honest, which means the nights will stay cold and the days bright. The mother agrees, her knee knows it. She says, and everyone smiles. After food, the elder sets aside a corner of the field for teaching. He brings out two stones, one heavy, one light. He places a finished chugo in one hand and an unfinished one in the other, then asks each child to guess which hand holds the finished one without looking. They close their eyes, lift his wrists by the fingers, and choose. The lesson is not a test. It is a way to give their hands more words. One child guesses right by weight, the other guesses right by sound, asking the elder to shake his hand gently. The finished ones rattle a tiny drum. The afternoon brings wind, a polite visitor who does not stay. The reed rattles speak for a time, and then rest. A hawk draws a circle over a far slope. The mother moves through the rows with a small broom made of bundled grass, flicking away dust that the wind has placed on a few mats. The elder adjusts the shade fence by two handspans to keep one row from drying too quickly. Even drying makes even cooking later. The pot likes a uniform story. As light grows warm, they begin the gathering into shade again, but with a new element, choice. Some baskets go to deeper shade, to invite a little more softness before the next frost. Others remain at the mat margins under a thin veil of reed, that they lay like a light blanket to protect from Tukina sky. 2 baskets are carried to the house wall and tipped into a large clay jar to begin the first small store. The jar is lined with straw that crackles like distant rain. A circle of clean cloth rests under the lid, and a pinch of salt lies in a small dish set just inside. The salt will sit watch and sip any stray damp that dares to return. The elder turns the lid with both hands until it thrones itself in the rin. He touches the jar's shoulder, an old habit, and says, "Keep well." A cousin arrives at the gate with news of water. "The spring above the field is running a little stronger today," he says. The family nods. Good for the experiment basin, good for tea, good for the animals. The cousin's child carries a small flute made of cane. The elder asks for one song, and the child obliges, sending a thin, sweet line across the mats. The tune is simple, stepping up and down like a patient ladder. It rises and falls with the light, and then ends on a note that feels like a resting place. Everyone thanks the child as if he had shared a cup. In work like this, small songs are as useful as strong ropes. When the sun leans toward the ridge, the elder brings out a tool that has slept. It is a shallow wooden tray with a low lip, worn smooth by many seasons. He pours a handful of almost finished chugo onto it and gives the tray a small, practiced shake. The tubers hop and turn, and he listens to them the way a potter listens to tapping clay. The sound tells him what the look might miss. "These are ready for the night's last frost," he says. "Those few," he points, "will want one more full day of sun before they join their brothers in the jar." Evening falls, not abruptly, but as a kind of agreement. The mats draw nearer. The baskets take their places. A dog wanders the field edge and finds a comfortable curve of earth to become. The elder sets a low marker stick at the corner of the most finished rotomaro. This will be the first to press with the lightest touch. He smooths the ground near the marker with his palm, a gesture as old as the practice itself. The mother ties the mouth of the experiment basin with a reed twist so night creatures will not drink and be surprised by the taste. Inside the house, the work thins to soft motions. A spindle turns and gathers a hank of wool that will one day be a sash. A child lays out sandals in a neat pair, toe to toe, so the morning feet will find them without scramble. Another child traces, with a fingertip, the pattern carved into the edge of the dough board, small diamonds, a travel of lines that feels like walking. The hearth coals huff once, and settle. Someone yawns and hides the yawn behind a sleeve, not from manners, but because it feels nice. Before sleep, and before the stars become a cold river overhead, the elder steps out with the measuring cord and ties one more small knot near the end. He holds the cord against the sky for a breath, as if the knots were counting the brightness too. The field seems to breathe with him. In the dark, the reed rattles look like thin letters against the faint lighter sky. He thinks how the field and the family and the season are one story written 3 ways, in frost in hands and in food. He goes inside. The latch finds its wooden seat. The night turns the plain to silver. The chugo lies ready for another step, and the people who tend it lie ready for sleep. The 4th dawn has a clearer edge. The cold arrives sure of itself, and the mats greeted like old companions. Before the sky shifts from indigo to pearl, the elder steps outside and listens. No wind yet. good for pressing. He kneels and lays his palm on a tuber. It answers with a faint creak, the sound of dryness finding shape. He wakes the house with a whisper and a hand on each shoulder. They rise without hurry. Everyone dresses in layers that remember work. Wool tunics with a clean patch on each elbow, belts that carry small knives, slings coiled soft at the waist. They eat a little warm drink, a bite of cheese, a folded cake of maize, then carry their breath out into the field. The frost lays a soft brightness on everything it touches. Sand looks sugared. Read not so tiny stars. The elder begins the circuit again, but today the path includes new pauses. He lifts one mat corner and checks the ground dry. He taps a stake and listens to its answer in the soil solid. He adjusts to shade fences by one hand span to invite more light to the hesitant rows. The mother follows with the gourd, giving the thinnest trickle to potatoes that feel too brittle. The children begin the pressing, but with a lighter foot, almost a caress. The tubers give way at once, a polite bow rather than a struggle. Mid-morning brings a small guest, a gray fox at the far fence, nose busy, tail a careful brush. It watches, decides there is nothing here for it, and glides away. The elder salutes it with 2 fingers. Good health, little neighbor. The dog sighs and decides not to remark. The family divides the field into 3 kinds by touch and sound. The first kind is ready for the jar. These rattle when shaken, and their weight fools the hand. The second kind needs one more dance with night. These are firm, but not hollow enough. The third kind are the stubborn few, large and slow to yield, good for the bottom of a stew pot later, not for long keep. They mark each kind with small reed flags, 1, 2, and 3 knots, so the pattern is easy to see even when the light turns flat. Rubbing begins in earnest. The mother shows a new trick, 2 people, 1 tuber between. Palms meet, roll separate. The skin peels clean like thin bark from a river stick. The children take turns in pairs, laughing softly when their rhythm matches. A tray gathers the skins, and the elder feeds them to a calm fire at the mat's edge. The fire is small on purpose. It sips, it does not eat. A pot of water warms there, with a dry sprig of local herb to share its lemony note. When the sun stands high, they test a small handful in the pot. The elder crumbles 3 pieces, drops them into the simmer, and watches them drink the water and soften. He stirs with a carved stick, then lifts a bit to a wooden spoon for the mother to taste. She blows on it, waits, tastes, and smiles with her eyes. The flavor is clean and friendly. It will hold soup, and it will share itself when asked. They add a pinch of salt and pass the spoon. Even the smallest child tastes. It is part of the learning to know a food not only by sight and sound, but by how it answers the mouth. After food and a short rest in the line of shade, they begin the storing. The big clay jar by the house wall is no longer alone. 2 more jars wait, mouths wiped with cloth, straw ready inside. The elder lifts finished chugo by double handfuls, letting them fall like quiet rain. The mother levels the layer with a flat palm, then shakes in a thimble of clean ash. Not much. Just enough to discourage the small, hidden lives that like to share. A circle of woven reed goes between layers, a gentle shelf that lets air talk to everything at once. When a jar is almost full, They add a small cloth bag with a few grains of salt, tie its string to the rim so they can find it later, then settle a lid. Each jar gets a mark. The elder presses a little wooden stamp into damp clay around the neck. 1 dot for the first batch, 2 for the second, 3 for the third. The dots will be easy to see in dim light. He also ties a simple cord with knots that match the mark, in case a covering of dust one day hides the clay. A neighbor stops at the gate with an emptied basket, and a question only partly spoken. The mother nods and fills the basket with a first gift of the season to hands of finished pieces, a little bag of skins for kindling, a reed twist to close the mouth. The neighbor leaves a thank you in the old way, a twist of dried herb, good in tea, and a piece of flatbread wrapped in a clean cloth. The exchange sits warm between houses, needing no ceremony. Food that keeps is food to share. Wine arrives in the afternoon with a different character, playful but not strong. The reed rattles sing. The elder watches the clouds, small and white and moving, and judges that the night will be cold enough still. He places the second kind tubs back on the mats in the exact order they came off, not because order pleases the eye though it does, but because the work holds better shape when remembered. He sets to slings by the door for an early evening carry to the cool room. Before the sun decides to touch the far ridge, a short walk. The elder and the older child take 1 sling each and follow the footpath to a low, stone-walled room built half into the hill. Inside, air sits still and cool. The room smells of clay and time. Other jars rest there from other years, their cords labeled, their shoulders dusted in a pale bloom. They place the new jars on a shelf made of saplings and cord. The shelf creaks once and then accepts the weight. They step back, the way one steps back from a neat stack of folded blankets. The child asks why the room always stays cool. The elder answers in a story voice, soft and straight. Stone likes to keep yesterday's weather, he says. It holds it like a secret and lets it out slowly. That is good for food that needs patience. Back at the field, the mother sorts the last stubborn few. These become the evening's pot. She crumbles them into a clay vessel with onions, a handful of dried peas, and a strip of herb. Water covers the mix, and the pot sits on a steady fire. The broth turns golden. A child dips a spoon and stirs with care. The table inside is set without fuss. Wooden bowls, a small dish of salt, a strip of cheese, a clutch of bitter greens. A cup of warm drink sits by each place. The family eats while the sky turns to ink and a thin new moon steps up, a sliver like a cuck reed. Night work is small. The elder rewinds the measuring cord around its peg and adds nothing to night. The knot came at dawn. He checks the sandals by the door. He turns the lid of each jar a finger width to be sure they seated well earlier, then settles them tight again. The mother lays the reed flags for the second kind in a neat row by the door, so they will be ready to return to their posts before sunrise. She folds the working cloths and hangs them over a line where smoke can share its slow kindness against damp. The children finish by writing the day in their own ways. One sorts 3 pebbles by size on the sill, largest to smallest, a little mirror of the field divisions. Another draws a soft line in the ash across the hearth, then a second line beside it, as if marking the 2 jars filled. The fire reads the lines and says nothing. The older steps out once more and looks toward a ridge where a path glows faintly in starlight. A pair of pack animals move there, bells a faint tin music. A trader is late, but not lost. He thinks of the Chugo traveling one day to another table, another pot, another family heartbeat. Food moves, and with it, stories move too. He spreads his hands to the cold air and gathers it back toward his chest, an old gesture of thanks to ground and sky. Inside, lids on pots, lids on jars, lids on eyes. The mats lie still. The frost is not here yet, but it will come. The family sleeps in a slow, even stack of breath. The field waits without worry. The Chugal knows its next step. It will meet the night one more time, and then it will be ready to live on a shelf, and then, when asked kindly by water and flame in a bowl, the last night of work arrives with a bright, breathless cold. Stars sit hard and near, the kind that make sound seem smaller. The family wakes before the edge of the ridge remembers color. They move without speech at first, each hand finding its tool as if the tools had slept beside them. Mats lie in long, patient legs. Reed flags wait by the door, cords already busy with knots. The elder steps outside and tastes the air with his teeth. Dry, he decides, and nods. Good for finishing. They walk the field together, not in a line now, but in a slow, drifting cluster, pausing wherever the frost has painted its thickest glass. Every few steps, a tuber is lifted lightly and set down again, the gentlest asking, "Are you hollow enough?" The ready ones answer by wheat or by the lack of it. Each piece is almost a memory of itself, a small drum that taps back when shook. The mother brings the gourd and gives the reluctant few a stingy sip, just enough to calm a sharp edge before the sun arrives. Today's pressing is more a courtesy than a task. Bare feet rest and then press, rest and then press, the way one might close a letter and smooth the fold so it holds. When the first thin stripe of pearl walks the ridge, the elder raises his palm. The family gathers at the southwest corner, where the mats began days ago. Here, the chubo is light as curled bark. They begin the last sorting with both hands and all senses. Palms measure shape. Fingertips read the fine lines left by frost and foam. Ears listen for the small wooden talk inside each tuber. Noses lift the faint mineral breath that belongs to stored winter. The elder keeps a shallow clay bowl at his side for the pieces that feel uncertain, too heavy or too soft. Those will go to the day's pot. Nothing is wasted. The field's voice simply chooses different paths. They carry the finished pieces to the jars in slings that don't swing. Two by two, they walk the short slope to the cool room that was carved half into earth long before the youngest child was born. Inside, the air rests at a single note. The shelf of saplings holds its quiet weight. Each layer of chubo gets its breath of ash and its circle of reed. The elder presses a little more ash into one jar's shoulder and says, just above a whisper, "This lot will travel when the dry season turns thin." The mother ties a new cord at the neck, 3 knots, and a twist, a language of storage as steady as counting. When the jars are sealed, they do a last thing the grandparents asked them always to remember. They choose a handful of the best pieces that rattle like small gourds when shaken and carry them to a low stone set apart at the field's edge. On this stone sits a flat dish of fired clay with a star scratched in its center. The elder sprinkles the handful there and touches the stone with 2 fingers. He names the mountains in a soft list, then the stream, then the field. He does not ask, he thanks. The dish keeps those thanks for a day and a night. Tomorrow the birds will take them. That is part of the keeping. The sun comes up clean and strong. With it rises the last work of the field, putting its pieces to rest. Mats are lifted and shaken so the frost beads let go and the dust walks away. They are rolled with the care linens receive in houses far from here, then tied with cords that know their knots, as if they grew with them. Short fence stakes come out with a crackle and stack like a sleeping bundle. The small wind fence that kept mischief away is folded along its reed bones and leaned under the eave. The flags move from ground to a string near the door, a quiet line of lessons, each not telling a day. Tools return to their nests. The bone comb is wiped on clean cloth, then tucked into the little reed box with its other, older brother. The gourd is rinsed in cold water and set upside down to dry on a stone. The measuring cord goes back to its peg with the lightest click. The elder bends and gathers the last stray skins. He feeds them to a tidy ember, and the smoke lines the air with a thin sweetness that belongs to this work and no other. Midday asked for a meal that honors both the new jars and the last of the uncertain bowl. The mother chooses the clay pot they use for guests. She lays a bed of onion and a handful of chopped herbs, then crumbles chugo into the pot with the tenderness one uses for a sleeping child. Water slides over everything, and a pinch of salt follows. The pot sits on 3 stones and begins its patient speech. The eldest child grinds a spoon of toasted chili on a flat rock to wake the broth gently. Another child lays bowls in a circle, each with its spoon and a folded square of cloth to sit on a knee. When the soup is ready, they eat without hurry, each bowl a small fog lifting in the cool room. The chugo softens and carries the pot's simple gift: salt, herb, onion without complaint. It is itself, and it is also the sum of its company. After the bowls are rinsed at the corner where a trickle keeps a song, the elder sits the children at the doorway with a new lesson that belongs to this final day. He lays 5 tubers on the threshold, 1 fresh, 1 from yesterday's uncertain bowl, and 3 finished chugos of slightly different sizes. With a small stick he taps each one, and lets the child say what it sounds like: wood, shell, pebble. He nods. Then he shows how a ready piece will float, and how a fresh one will sink. A simple trick for days when ears feel unsure. He does not call it a test. He calls it a friend to the hand. Neighbors arrive in easy pairs as the sun lengthens. There is no fare or tally today, only visits and glances into jars. A woman from 2 houses away brings a bag of ground chili and leaves with a cloth packet of chugo, both sides saying, "May your winter be friendly." A man with a bundle of llama wool ties a small hank to a jar's cord as a blessing. Children trade a few apples dried in summer for a twist of reed that will become a toy. The jars accept all of this silently. They are made for quiet. By late afternoon, the field has the neatness of hair just combed. The dog finds the exact center of the cleared place and curls there, content that his watch has fewer smells to sort. A bird rests on the post where the first reed flag used to be. It turns in a patient circle, taking inventory that it will not share. The elder looks once more at the sky. A high thin cloud has begun to comb the blue. Nights will likely soften now. That is right. The work answered the weather now answers the work. He runs a hand along the door lintel as if it had shoulders and needed praise. The children bring the last bundles of mats indoors and stack them by the cool room, then put their hands flat on the jar's warm clay lids as if greeting sleeping animals. The mother wipes the hearthstones and lays tinder for tomorrow's breakfast. As the first notable chill walks in from the plain, the family gathers on the step. They do not speak much. They count by looking, jars, flags, mats. The outline of the field, the elder says, in a voice that sounds like a well-kept path. Winter is wrapped. The smallest child repeats the sentence, not as an echo but as something to keep. Night folds the field. The frost will still visit, but its work here is finished. From now until hunger asks, the chugo will rest and then travel to the pot on a distant road, to a bowl beside a loom, to a trader who walks a line of hills where snow still remembers names. Food that keeps is time made quiet. And as the family closes their door and the mats go to sleep in their tidy roll, we can set our steps toward warm, damp air and a timber room where cocoons learn to become a single, even thread steam, and patience turning many small fibers into one calm line. We arrive in a quiet wooden house that leans toward a small canal. The canal hardly moves. It holds the sky the way a bowl holds tea, steady and reflective. A narrow footbridge crosses to a mulberry grove, its leaves still wet from dawn. Inside the house, the air is warm and damp. Shallow copper pans sit on brick hearths, and thin steam rises from each one in slow folds. The room smells like softened bark and faint soap. It is not a strong smell. It asked for no attention. It simply lives there, as common as breath. At the long table, a reeler rests her palm on a bundle of cocoons. They are light, almost feathery, and dry as paper lanterns. A little brush made of broom grass lies beside the pans. It looks like nothing more than a child's toy, but it is the key to the morning. She lifts it and taps the warm water with the lightest touch. Threads come free like spider silk caught on dew. They are too fine to see at first, so she feels them with the back of a finger. When the first filaments gather, she feeds them across a small porcelain guide with a neat hole and eye that will keep the line true. The reel waits above the pan, a simple wooden wheel with flanges that catch the new strand. It begins to turn at the slightest pull. The sound is not loud. It is a round wooden hush, a whispering circle that could put a child to sleep. The woman draws fine filaments out of several cocoons at once, letting them join their slender voices into one stronger line. The water keeps the fibers willing. Warmth softens the gum the silkworm left behind. The threads agree to hold one another. They travel in a single path that glints when the steam lifts. An apprentice sits to the reeler's left. She is young enough that her braid still tickles her shoulder when she leans. Her work is to mind the heat. She pushes the charcoal with iron tongues so embers breathe without flare. A little wine bell hangs from the rafters. If the air moves too quickly through the cracks, the bell will say so with a clink. Humidity matters in this room. It keeps the threads from arguing with the air. The apprentice also keeps chopsticks nearby lacquered smooth. When a bit of cocoon fluff swims to the top, she catches it with a dip and a lift, then rests it on a saucer that shows tiny crescent marks from earlier mornings. The reeler's hands move in a rhythm that looks like stillness from far away. Her right hand guides the line and answers small changes. Her left feeds the ends of fresh cocoons when the spent ones let go. She knows by feel when to add one, when to let one retire. Now and then she lowers the brush again to find the next voice in the water. She does not search. She invites. The brush gathers a tangle that smooths out the moment it joins the group. The wheel accepts all of it with the tender gravity of a spool catching kite string. Along the wall, bamboo rods rest on brackets like a row of calm fishing poles. Finished skeins will hang there later, twisted into gentle figure eights so they do not crowd one another. For now a ledger board leans on a peg. It is no more than a pine plank with charcoal marks, date, weight, and a short stroke for each skein. The reeler will not touch it until the coil is ready. Counting comes after the work has learned its own number. Outside, a mulberry leaf slips from its branch and lands on water without a splash. Inside, a kettle sighs. An older woman pours hot water into a cupboard cup and lets tea leaves rise once, then settle. She sets the cup near the reeler's right elbow, not close enough to dampen the thread, but near enough that warmth sits at the edge of her attention. A mouthful now and then will keep the morning even. In this house, tea is not a break from labor. It is a tool against haste. If you listen carefully, the room has its family of small sounds. Steam gives soft applause. A reel sings a wooden circle song. Charcoal clicks as it rearranges itself into better breathing. Chopsticks make a single tiny knock when they meet the saucer. Pages of a thin paper fan turn to cool the apprentice's cheek, then sleep on her knee. None of it is sudden. Each sound understands that others are nearby and shares the space. In a corner, a woven basket holds cocoons with faint penciled notes on a tag, the grove's name, the week the worms spun, the weather that week clouds or rain, then to days of wind. It may seem overly careful to write such things, but silk can remember weather long after the sky has forgotten. Slight differences in warmth and leaf will change how the thread agrees to gather. These notes are not rules. They are gentle introductions. They say, this lot prefers a kinder pan, or this one will ask for more threads in the bundle to sing steadily. By the door, a boy returns from the shed with a small shovel of fine ash. He sifts it through a slanted screen to catch the lumps and leaves a silky gray in a jar. Ash sits beside water and charcoal as part of the house's quiet chemistry. If a pan grows too eager and the water answers with a little foam, a pinch of ash calms it at once. The boy also scrubs the porcelain eye with a loop of soft reed. He moves slowly, the way you trace a character when you want it to stick in your hand. The reeler lifts her reel and tilts it so the new coil can dry a little breeze. The silk looks like pale honey pulled into floss, but it feels cooler, almost cool enough to surprise a wrist. She loops the coil over a low frame and lets it rest there until the shine steps back from wet to merely bright. Then she opens the loop with both hands and twists it into a hank left, then right, then left again, letting the strands settle into a shape that will remember patience. She ties the hank with a single thread drawn from itself. It makes a knot that holds without leaving a harsh memory. This is a kindness to whoever will dye the silk later. Hard knots drink dye differently. Soft knots ask no attention. As the first skeins begin to gather on the bamboo rods, a soft draft rifles the paper strips above the door, little slips brushed with characters for luck and steadiness. The apprentice closes the door part way, then lifts the kettle lid with a cloth and adds a measured spoon of water to each pan. She has learned not to pour quickly. Sudden cool will shock the gum and make the thread think of letting go. She pours along the edge, letting warmth keep its shape. On a shelf near the stove, a porcelain jar keeps a paste made the day before by boiling cocoons until they gave up a little of their gum to the water. Reduced and cooled, it is a clear jelly. If a strand breaks on the reeler touches that jelly to the ends with a fingertip and twists once. The line mends and moves on. This may seem like a small thing, but every small thing in this room is a tool for making tomorrow smooth. A clean mend will tighten again and die and not announce itself as a mistake. From time to time, the reeler lifts her gaze to the window lattice, not to look outside, but to rest her eyes on a simple pattern. Squares and light hold her focus without asking anything. Then her attention returns to the water and the line. She trades an empty cocoon for a full one and drops the hollow shell into a basket. Later, someone will untwist the caps, dry them, and save the fluff for padding or paper. In this house, even the husk learns another job. Near the back wall, straw sandals wait by a bucket of clear water. Feet will slip there at midday. Warm floors and standing work can pull color from the mind, and a rinse brings it back. Beside the bucket sits a cloth with a little rice flour sifted across its center. Sticky fingers press into the flour and come away polite again. The reeler rubs a thumb and smiles with half her face, a motion that barely disturbs the air. The morning lengthens, but nothing hurries. Stains bloom on their rods. The ledger receives its first marks quiet lines, not tallies. The kettle speaks again, and the cup replies. Outside, a boat passes on the canal with a sound like a broom across a clean floor. Inside, the brush finds another quartet of filaments, and the wheel breathes them into one unbroken path. By mid-morning, the light inside the room is the color of tea with milk. It comes through oiled paper windows and spreads evenly across the pans, the reels, the wooden floor polished by years of steps. Nothing shines too brightly. Even the silk takes the light as if it were a polite guest, bright but soft. The reeler lifts a fresh basket of cocoons to the table. She tips a few into her palm and weighs them without thinking. Some are a little heavier, some feel hollow. She sets aside those that sound too light when tapped, thin shells that will end too quickly on the reel. A small clay bowl holds damaged cocoons with little bite marks or thread snags. These will later be boiled and spread into batting for padded jackets. In this house, nearly everything finds its place. At the far end of the table, a second reel turns in a mirrored rhythm. The man who works it is older. He talks little, and his hands tell time. He gathers more filaments to make a slightly thicker line. Merchants sometimes ask for different strength. Wefts can be gentle, warps want more courage. The difference is simple in words, but it rests in the wrist. The older man has a touch that keeps a thicker thread even, as if he were pulling a calm rope out of a calm well. Beside him, a porcelain dish holds a clear jelly of Saracen, the silkworm's own glue. When a strand surprises him and lets go, he sets down the wheel with 2 fingers, touches the jelly, and twists the ends together. The mend is small and smooth. Later, when dyers handle the skein, the joint will behave like the rest. It is an old trick, as familiar as putting a kettle on the stove. The apprentice keeps her little world in order. When steam gathers and turns to drops on the panzerin, she wipes them away with a cloth that knows this job alone. Drips that fall cold could make the thread think of splitting. She watches for tiny bubbles too. If they start to gather, she draws a pinch of sifted ash and lays it along the edge like a line of quiet salt. The water agrees at once and smooths its face. Every hour the room resets itself by inches. The kettle breathes. The charcoal sighs. A thin stick of sandalwood smolders near the door more for flies than fragrance. The boards creak once, then forget. The reeler's cup of tea empties a finger's width at a time. She sets the lid back on the cup so the fragrance stays home, and the dust from the pans minds its own business. When a coil on the reel grows broad enough, she slides it off in a single ring. She lifts it to her face and listens to it breathe. Silk does not make a sound you can name, but a fresh coil tells you if it is right. It gives a whisper like a soft brush across paper. If the whisper is even, the thread is even. She twists the ring into a hank, left, right, left, and gives it a tie of itself. The tie sits like a small ear, knowing how to open later without a quarrel. She moves to the bamboo rack and hangs the hank beside its mourning sisters, leaving a small space between each so air can pass. On a low stool a ledger waits. She marks the weight on a wooden balance to pans, a little stack of brass seeds, and adds a line to the board. Day coil, the grove where the cocoons were born. The marks look like footprints crossing a shallow stream. A bell at the canal sounds twice, not for time, but for a boatman who wants help at the small landing. The boy goes out and comes back with a bundle of mulberry twigs tied with grass. The bundle is not large. Leaves are used more in spring. But cut twigs and trimmed branches still have value. He places them under the eaves where they will dry into kindling. He also brings a folded sheet of paper sealed with a bean-sized dab of paste. It carries a merchant's request, 2 bundles of fine reeled silk, 1 bundle of the stronger kind packed in layers with plain paper, sealed with a red stamp that knows the house. The older man nods and points with his chin to a clean table in the corner. Packing will come afternoon. For now the reels ask for company. New cocoons go into the pans, and the brush finds the clear voices under the thin skin of steam. If you lean close, you see a small choreography. The filaments leave their old homes and cross the water to the porcelain eye. The eye gives them a simple rule together, and the wheel makes that rule live. When the first break comes, never dramatic, only a pause the house eats. A rice pot waits in a clay thick-walled jar under its quilted cover. The apprentice spreads bowls that do not match. A dish of pickled mustard greens appears, a pinch of sesame salt, a wedge of bean curd with a drizzle of soy. Chopsticks clack once as they are set down. No one eats hurriedly. The pause is part of the work. Hands rest. Eyes travel to the window lattice and the simple heaven of its squares. A breeze remembers to pass. Someone mentions the grove upstream. Worms did well this year. The mulberry trees were pruned after the last frost and answered kindly. Another voice says the dyer in town has a new pot that keeps indigo more even. A remark drifts like a leaf. A new bridge is being built of pine and stone where the road crosses the canal. The talk folds into silence again. The way rice folds into the muff. After bowls are stacked and rinsed, the apprentice ladles warm water into the pans and stirs gently to lift the tiny silk scum that has gathered. She skims it off with a fine sieve, then wipes the porcelain eyes with the reed loop, like washing the lids of a sleepy face. The reels wake again. The day resumes its soft pace. Now the work widens a little. Beside the drying rack, another table holds a small wheel for twisting. Not all silk leaves the house as single lines. Some is twisted just enough to make a thread that will behave on a loom where warp pulls sharply. The small wheel looks like a cousin to the reel, but its music is lower. A foot treadle turns it. The reeler sets a hank on a swift wooden arms that open like a flower and feeds the line to the twisting wheel. She gives it a slow one-way spin that makes the thread climb itself neatly, never in a knot. She counts the turns under her breath. Twisting is only needed just so. Too much, and the thread grows tired. Too little, and it will sigh apart on the warp beam. She winds the twisted thread onto a paper core, a small roll made from pages with old writing. Characters peek out and disappear under the new line. There is a quiet friendship in this. Words that once told something now rest inside a thread that will one day be cloth. The core slides into a basket with others like it, and the basket receives a paper slip with the house stamp. Red, round, and certain. Outside, the canal brings a message of its own, the small smell of fish and reed, the shadow of a boat pole passing like a slow metronome along the window. Down the lane, a rooster clears his throat and thinks better of it. The day is warm now, but the house remains a pocket of damp coal gathered from the pans. Moisture helps. Silk does not like thirst. A neighbor arrives with a bundle wrapped in blue cotton, returns skeins, dyed and dried, the color of willow shade. She leaves them by the door with a bow and a word for the apprentice. Payment will go back with packed goods this afternoon, a neat paper, a pinch of coin, and a small thank you in the form of tea leaves. This is how houses talk to each other when work speaks most of the day. In the corner, the boy sorts empty cocoons. Some still hold little chrysalises, light as nutshells. He sets those aside in a shallow basket that will go to the chicken yard behind the house. They are feed there, a quiet exchange that turns one kind of work into another. The rest he fluffs and spreads to dry. When layered, they become cloud-soft quilts for winter. You can press a palm into that batting and feel nothing but warm, forgiving air. The reeler checks her ledger again and adds a stroke. She has learned the shape of the day by the marks on the board. Morning is long lines, afternoon is shorter ones, evening is the last thin row where the hands agree to stop before the light forgets itself. Today seems normal in the most generous sense, not dull, not exciting, simply steady, which is the best weather for a house like this. As the sun begins to slope, she wipes the reel spokes with a damp cloth and oils the axle with a drop of bean oil from a tiny bottle. Wood answers oil with a deeper color, like bread that has seen the oven. She tests the wheel with 2 fingers and listens. It turns the way a thought turns when it knows where it is going. Soon they will pack the day's silk. Paper will fold her on each hank like a kind hand. A string will tie, and a red stamp will say who cared for this thread and in which season. But for a little longer, the brush returns to the warm pan, finds the ends, and the wheel breathes its soft circle song. Afternoon begins with paper and string. On a clean table, the reeler sets a square of mulberry paper and places two hanks across it like calm rivers. She folds the corners in, then lays a second square to make a gentle envelope. A brush writes a few characters: house name, real strength, weight, and the ink dries before it thinks of running. A dab of red paste accepts the round stamp. The mark is soft but certain, like a thumbprint that has learned to read. Beside her, the older man prepares ties. He twists narrow strips of paper on a cord so the bundle will not bite into itself. The cord is hemp, light as a breath in the hand. He drops two peppercorns and a sliver of camphor into a tiny paper packet and tucks it under the tie. Moths dislike such company. It is a small hedge against a long journey. On the floor, a low balance waits. Brass seeds play their little game, climbing the pan until the arm settles level. The apprentice calls the number, and the reeler repeats it, an old habit that keeps the ledger honest. She writes with a goose quill trimmed short. The strokes are simple, with no special flourishes. Numbers carry their own dignity, without ornament. When 5 neat parcels rest in a row, the boy brings the carrying chest from under the stairs. It is pine rubbed with oil and touched at the corners with thin iron. The lid fits so well it makes no sound when lowered. The apprentice spreads a reed mat inside and sets each parcel down in pairs, leaving a finger's width between them so air can pass. A final sheet of paper lays over the top, then the lid accepts its pin. The chest is not heavy. Silk is strong and light at once, which is one of its private magics. A boatman's call arrives like a polite knock, a single note, not urgent. The older man lifts the chest and lets the boy take the other handle. Down the lane, the canal waits, its edge lined with moss that looks like soft felt. A small craft lies against a piled stone landing. The boatman has tied a grass rope to a cleat worn smooth as an old cone. He touches his brow and uses both hands to receive the chest. That gesture matters here. Goods like this move with hands that make room for respect. At the guild shed, they set the chest on a scale that has weighed such boxes for years. A clerk taps out numbers with a bamboo stick on his board and speaks them low, as if reading the weather. He opens the lid, checks one stamp, and nods at the neat pepper packets tucked under the ties. A thin strip of blue paper seals the chest shut again, crossed by a red circle that carries the shed's mark. It is the river's signature, added to the house's own. On the walk back, the lane gives its usual news. A woman spreads salted greens on a bamboo tray to dry. A carpenter planes a stick for a stool leg, and each stroke leaves a ribbon that curls like a small scroll. 2 boys send a reed boat along the ditch and run beside it, laughing in a whisper so as not to annoy door gods painted on a nearby gate. The reeler and the apprentice say little. Their bodies know the day's steps and save words for when words are needed. Back inside, the pans are still warm. Steam lifts again with a contented sound when fresh water is ladled in. Afternoon cocoons feel different under the brush, perhaps softer after the day's heat. The reeler brings the filaments together with the same patience she gave the parcels. The porcelain eye catches the line, the reel smooths it into a steady path. The older man moves to the twisting wheel. He sets 2 single threads side by side and gives them a slow marriage of spin, one over the other. The twist runs the same way along the entire length. He tests it by letting a short piece hang from his finger. It does not kink or complain. He smiles without showing teeth and wins the pair onto a paper core. He slips a new slip of paper under the twine. For warp, the word is short, but in it you can hear loam's rooms, and the weight of cloth still far in the future. A small breeze visits. The apprentice sprinkles the floor with a few drops from the kettle and sweeps them into the boards. Damp wood keeps dust polite and the air kind to thread. She lifts a reed screen to soften the light where it falls too strongly on the drying rack. Silk is brave, but it prefers gentleness. She brings out the rice bran bowl and rubs her hands in the soft meal, then rinses them in warm water. Silk loves clean hands, and rice bran leaves skin smooth without sharpness. The reeler does the same. Some days the Saracen the silkworm glue makes fingers glossy, rice bran persuades it away without argument. This small washing is a pause that feels like gratitude. Work continues. The same motions, the same sounds, but never a sense of drag. The wheel talks in a low wooden hum. The brush kisses water and finds a voice. The kettle remembers when to ask for more charcoal, and the boy offers it a handful as if feeding a quiet pet. The oiled paper windows soften the outside world into milk and shadow. Time is visible here in the height of skeins, and the slow migration of light across the table. The reeler adds a new habit to the afternoon. Every few hanks, she takes one to the window and looks at it sideways. She holds it up and lets a ribbon of thread cross her palm. She is reading its evenness not with her eyes, but with the small nerves that live just under the skin. A little roughness means a tiny leaf tangle, a forgotten life moment in the cocoon. She does not scold it. She notes it in the ledger with a brief mark. The dyer will know how to persuade such places to behave with softer hands. Between reels, a short tea break. The leaves have already done their work once, and can offer a second kindness. The apprentice warms the cups first, then fills them. The reeler watches the swirl settle and smiles. In houses like this, tea is not ceremony, it is a friend that knows how to sit quietly. The talk turns to weather and worms. If spring comes early, the older man says, mulberry buds will not wait. Then worms must not wait either. He mentions a cousin upriver who keeps eggs in cool jars wrapped in straw and moves them from shelf to shelf as days lengthen. Timing is everything with small lives. The apprentice listens as if learning a song. When the cup's empty, threads find their road again. The apprentice tries the reel. The reeler stands behind her and watches the rhythm of wrist and elbow. Not the arm, she says softly. The fingers do the counting, the girl slows, and the line steadies. She is not scolded. The house is a school without that kind of voice. Corrections are brief and warm as a hand on a shoulder. Toward late afternoon, a neighbor's reed flute drifts in the window, thin as a thread itself. The song is old and knows how to breathe with the reel. Dragonflies practice patience above the canal. A heron lifts each foot slowly as if stepping on paper. The older man begins to close the day's circle. He empties the charcoal jar and banks the little stove so it will offer a soft heat into evening cleaning. He sets the pepper packets back in their tin and wipes the red paste rin. He looks at the ledger, adds the last line, and draws a modest crossbar that says enough. It is a line they do not break unless a merchant's urgent knot begs it. Such nights are rare. Work wants regular sleep, too. The reeler finishes a hank and smooths its ear. She hangs it on the rack where late light makes it a pale river. She wipes the reel spokes, then turns the wheel once without thread and listens. The sound is almost not there, a wooden breath. She nods. The day has been even. No drama, only skill. Evening comes in on soft feet. The color of the room turns from rice milk to tea, and the oiled paper windows show a few first fireflies as small, green commas in the lane. Work does not hurry. It narrows, becomes tidier, and folds itself toward rest. The reeler chooses the last pan for the day. She skins the surface with the broom grass brush and finds the faint glint where a filament waits. The water is a touch cooler now. That helps. Threads behave well when heat is polite, rather than eager. She draws 5 filaments together, then 7, and feeds the bright strand through the porcelain eye. Her fingers know the angle at which the tension feels like a humming string rather than a whispering one. The wheel turns. A low wooden song answers. On a nearby stool, the apprentice begins end-of-day sorting. Skeins that will go to warp are gathered to one side, those meant for weft to another. Warp wants firmness, weft wants kindness. She checks each tile with a small twist to be sure nothing has snagged. She pets every hank as if it were a living thing that has done good work. Silk seems to stand a bit taller under such hands. The older man opens the camphor chest and takes out a small paper of blue clay used for brightening. A pinch on the fingers, rubbed away, leaves skin dry and clean. He turns to the porcelain guides and strokes each one with a damp cloth. The guides are smooth as river stones, they must stay that way. He checks for the tiniest chip by listening. He taps each ring with a bamboo splint and hears only a round, even note. A nick would sing sharp. All is round tonight. He moves to the wheel and looks at the leather strap that carries motion from foot to drum. He rubs it with a drop of tallow. The strap drinks that small moon of grease and becomes content again, ready to pull without complaint tomorrow. The wheel itself gets a breath of linseed at its axle. He spins it once, twice. It glides as if air had become a bearing. The boy clears the spent cocoons that have floated to the edge like little boats with their sails down. He lifts them with chopsticks and lays them in a wicker tray. Some will be boiled and unwound again for floss used in padding and soft filling. Nothing here is eager to be wasted. He tips the pan, swirls, and watches the light ripple. When the ripples flatten quickly, he knows a film of gum has gathered. He wipes it away and rinses the rim with a careful pour of fresh water from a gourd. A neighbor pushes the door with her knuckles and peeks in. She has brought mulberry leaves bundled in a cloth and asks if the house wants them for the hatchlings due next week in her cousin's shed. The older man trades her a small twist of thread for a hairpin. This is ordinary little neighborly trades that keep a street woven together. She leaves with a bow too small to be called a ball, and the door eases shut. The ledger receives its evening numbers. The reeler names each bundle by the soft coat of the house. Lot 3 midday like twist good. The older man writes the same words, then adds a dot next to one that felt slightly dry. That dot will be enough tomorrow to tell him to steam a basin nearby and lay a damp cloth over the rack while they wind. Humidity is velvet to silk. Outside, the canal makes a low throat noise when a boat glides past a pier. Inside, the kettle asks for a last handful of charcoal. The boy feeds it and stirs the pan beside it so the water will be warm for washing tools. The apprentice counts labels and cuts new ones, stacking them into a small pagoda of tidy slips. Each one is a promise to a future day. The reeler finishes the last reel and pinches the line with a wet finger so the end will not fray. She ties the hank in 4 places so it will not shrug itself into a knot, then lays it on the rack where the day has been hanging in pale loops. She stands still for a moment and listens to the house. The soft click of the wheel slowing, the light lick of brush and water, the almost silence of steam. It is the kind of quiet that has many small voices inside it, each content to be small. Cleaning begins. The apprentice carries the porcelain eyes to a shallow basin and washes them in warm water with a touch of rice bran. She rinses them in a second bowl and sets them on a cloth. A line of white circles looks like the path of a moon across a page. She dries each one by rolling it in the cloth rather than rubbing, then returns them to their box where straw makes nests that remember the shape. The older man lifts the reel's crossbars free and wipes them with a cloth dampened in a dish of hot water with a drop of vinegar. Vinegar discourages the thin film left by Saracen. He turns each bar in his hands and checks the corners for splinters with a thumbnail. If he finds the least roughness, he drops the crossbar into a separate stack that will meet sandpaper tomorrow when the first light makes seeing easier. The boy washes the pans with a round brush of sorghum bristles, moving in slow spirals that mirror the day's lines. He tilts them so the last light catches in a clean, bright oval at the bottom. When he stacks them, he puts a sliver of bamboo between each so they will not sigh and stick against one another. He ladles out the kettle, leaves an inch for the night so the iron will not dry and scald. The reeler opens the drying cupboard, a wood-framed cabinet lined with paper, and a clay pan at the bottom that keeps the air soft. She moves a few new hanks inside and closes the door with a cloth-held hand so the latch will not chatter. On the edge of the cabinet, a charcoal mark notes how many hanks it will cuddle overnight. The mark is small, the memory is large. Now the room receives its evening sweep. Rice husks, swept up with dust, move politely toward the door and out into the yard where they will trouble no one. The apprentice sprinkles the floorboards with a spoon of tea water and makes long, even strokes with the broom so no grit will wait to catch tomorrow's thread. She leans the broom bristle up, as always, to keep its shape thoughtful. Before the shutters close, the reeler checks the sky. A thumb-width moon sits above the far roof and tells her the worms upriver will be hungry tomorrow. She thinks of trays lined with paper, rows of sleeping eggs, mulberry leaves folded into little hills by small, serious hands. She thinks of how those eggs will haze, then hatch, and how a room will begin to sound like gentle rain as thousands of mouths nibble at once. It may seem unusual now to count the hour by the sound of leaves being eaten, but in soap country that is a clock as true as any bell. She returns to the bench and takes a last look at the day's 5 parcels in their reed-lined box. She presses each lightly so the paper settles kindly over the silk. She tucks a slender sprig of dried osmanthus under the top sheet. Its scent is shy and clean. When the box opens elsewhere, a room there will inherit a little of this room's evening. The older man pinches the lamp's wick shorter and lowers the flame until the brass chimney is just warm to the hand. He hangs the ledger on its nail and sets the goose quill in a cup with bristles and bone tools. He ties the braid of broom grass so it will keep its waist. The boy wraps the gourd ladle in cloth so it will not crack with the night's cool. They step out together. The door's bar settles on its hooks without a clack because a scrap of silk, saved from a knotted mess long ago, cushions the wood. In the lane, neighbors lift shutters. A pot clinks on a stove. Someone laughs once. The canal takes the last raft of light and keeps it without hurry. Back at their small house, the reeler will rub her hands with rice bran again and hold them over a bowl of warm water until they remember softness. She will lay her head on a woven pillow and hear, even with eyes closed, the day's thread still making its quiet line. Work that repeats can be a kind lullaby. Night holds the lane the way a palm cups water. Doors turn to darker rectangles. The canal carries the faintest band of sky like a ribbon laid flat. Inside the reeling house, all is set to rest, yet the work still lives in small, silent ways. Skeins breathe out a trace of warm leaf. Tools cool and remember the hands that shaped their day. A short walk away, and neighbor's sericulture shed keeps a different kind of quiet. On stacked trays, sleeping caterpillars dream inside neat rooms of their own making. The trays are just wide enough for a child to lift with both arms. Each bed is papered with mulberry leaf crumbs and tiny husks swept aside with a peacock feather fan. Tomorrow these dreamers will be carried in woven baskets to boiling pans and then to basins, where a single hair-like start to a filament will be found with a gentle whisk of broom grass. It may feel unusual now to think of a farm measured not in fields, but in rooms of little eaters and in loops of thread. Yet for many villages along this river, that was the ordinary pulse of spring and summer. Wine skims the water, and a few drops of mist collect on the eaves. In this damp gentleness, silk grows calmer, less fly away. The reeler will be grateful for that when morning returns. Humidity is a good teacher. It coaxes stray ends to mind themselves and keeps a line from becoming a cloud. At home, she unwraps a small tin of camellia oil and rubs a breath of it into her fingertips. Hands do not forget work in a hurry. They hold the feel of a porcelain ice curve, the angle of a guide rod, the weight of a reel's crank, the soft give of cocoons swirling in hot water. She flexes each finger and listens for little clicks that mean joints are satisfied. A bowl of rice, a sliced pear, a cup of steep-leaf supper makes no noise beyond a spoon's brief tap. Before sleep she checks a cloth bag where she keeps the day's narrow trimmings and knots useful for tying labels, for practicing a new twist, for mending a household seam. Even the smallest lengths have destinations. Dawn arrives as a pale thought. The lane is pewter, then pewter with milk, then milk touched by apricot. Somewhere, a rooster offers to short comments and decides more would be unnecessary. The reeler's feet find their sandals without looking. She takes a small clay brazier from under its cover and lays 2 thin coals on a cake of ash. They glow, and the little stove begins the day's breeding. When the door bar lifts, the house smells faintly of osmanthus and clean wood. Tools lie just where night left them. The drying cabinet is first. She opens it and inhales the soft, warm sweetness that silk releases in a closed space. The hanks have set their memory. Each loop wears the shape of the rod and the tie. She turns them one by one so light touches the other side, and runs her thumb over a strand to be sure the twist is even. Warp wants a firmer twist. Weft is allowed to be a little tender. She separates two bundles, one to travel upriver to a dyer with cypress vats, one to cross town to a workshop that will wind warps for a drawloom. The older man arrives and sets the ledger on the bench, its corners rounded by many hands. He opens a drawer and brings out a small balance scale with bone pans. A pebble-weight polished by years of thumb sits in its own silk pocket. They weigh and mark. The numbers are not magic. They are simply a way to let distant hands trust near ones. He ties a red silk thread around the top of each hank to show the grade the house's quiet code for fineness and strength. A buyer will know it at a glance and will test the line with wet fingers and a little pull. A good thread sings in a thin, almost inaudible way when stretched. The reeler hears that sound now in her head and smiles. The apprentice sweeps the floor with water from a basin where a pinch of rice bran floats. Bran pins the dust. She makes long strokes so boards lie smooth under tomorrow's footfalls. Then she prepares the day's labels. Thin slivers of bamboo shaved to a quill-like point dipped in lamblack and glue. She writes the house marked 3 tiny strokes like reeds and a number for the lot, then fans them dry. Each label feels calmer if it has been handled with steady breath. Before pans are kindled, they check the water. The boy carries it from the canal into buckets that hang from a shoulder pole padded with cloth. He lets the first settle so clear water can be dipped from above the sill. A ladle pours it into shallow pans. The older man adds a spoon of spent water saved from yesterday. The faint Saracen helps filaments find one another. It is an old trick and an easy kindness. Heat starts small. The charcoal rests on a nest of ash, coaxes itself brighter, and only then receives a fanned breath. The pans never boil. They are taught to stay below a simmer, a temperature that allows a cocoon to loosen without rushing. When a pan is ready, the reeler draws the broom grass brush across the surface and feels at once if the filaments will accept her invitation. They do. A merchant arrives with a carrying frame and a ledger bound in indigo-dyed cloth. He tests a hank, as buyers do, by rubbing it quickly between his fingers, by listening for that shy song. By lifting the skein to his cheek, silk tells its story in many languages: sound, shine, touch. He nods and unrolls a strip of paper printed with the characters of his house. The older man stamps it with the workshop seal, a little vermilion square that looks like a brick of sunrise. The merchant balances the bundles on his frame, ties them with twine that bites lightly, and thanks the rune as if it were a person. While trade is brief and polite, the day inside the house expands. The apprentice sets a low tray with 5 cocoons and a folded note. It is a lesson and a game. She wants the boy to find each filament, gather them into a single line, and then write down which ones were easy and which asked for patience. He leans over the pan, his face reflected in the water like a darker moon, and touches the brush so lightly the bristles almost do not bend. When the filaments clasp one another and become a single thread, he grins in a way that makes the room feel a shade warmer. Practice is a long, friendly road here. No one runs on it. A pause at mid-morning brings tea and small cakes sweetened with malt. The reeler loosens the cloth on her wrists and flexes again, palms up, then palms down. She looks at the skeins hanging along the wall and thinks of where they will go. Some will become the strong hidden lines in a patterned satin. Some will be dyed the color of peach blossom and worn in a sleeve that flickers like a fish. Some will be left pale and made into thread for embroidery which will lay clouds and cranes onto a sleeve or a screen. Work that begins as fog over hot water can end as a garden you can roll up and carry. As the sun tilts, the house returns to the familiar tide. Gather, guide, wind, tie, mark, rest. The rhythm is both tool and teacher. It keeps the mind from wandering too far and lets it wander just enough to ease the hours. Toward late afternoon, the breeze off the canal turns sweet with a neighbor's stew of greens and tofu. The boy stands at the door for a moment, just breathing, then comes back to the brush with a new patience. Food smells are clocks too. When the last skein of the shift is tied, the day folds itself neatly as cloth. Tools are washed, labels counted, coal tamped to a safe glow. The reeler runs her thumb along the reel's axle and closes her eyes for half a breath. Everything is ready to be tomorrow's yesterday. She hangs the broom and leans the pans on their edge so air will pass around them. The older man closes the ledger, ties it with a red cord, and sets a paperweight, a smooth river pebble on top. The room has the pleasant look of a page with its final dot. Outside, swallows draw ink lines across the sky. From the square at the town gate, a bell speaks once. Boats nudge a pier. Somewhere a vendor calls out sweet buns. The reeler steps into the lane and thinks of another kind of square far away, a wide, flat one where food is weighed, where voices measure value in a different music. And as the silk house dims and its wheels go quiet, we'll travel west by imagination to a cobbled market just after dawn, where brass pans kiss balance and a small bell keeps fair company with cheese and ink. Before the sun has climbed the gables, the square is already awake in a quiet way. Cobblestones hold last night's dew in their seams. Ropes are coiled by the canal. In the middle distance stands the way house, its brick front steady and patient, its tall roof holding a small bell that knows exactly when to speak. The air is a mix of sea salt and straw. A gull calls once, and then lets the morning do the rest. The waymaster arrives with a key that sits heavy and familiar in his palm. He lifts the latch and steps into a room that smells of wood rubbed smooth by many hands. The great beam balance waits under its canopy. Iron knife edges, bright from careful care, rest on their bearings like thin smiles. Brass pans nest on a shelf, each one the color of warm coin. He sets his bag on the counter and opens the shutters to a square of soft pearl light. Dust in the shaft of brightness turns for a moment and settles again. He begins as he always does. First, they cloth. Linen clean and a little stiff to wipe each surface that will meet food. Then the knife edges, a fingertip touched to oil, wiped away to leave only memory, then a breath across metal to carry the last speck of lint aside. A small brush, bristles trimmed even with a knife, clears the groove where the beam pivots. The balance answers with a slow, even dip as if bowing back. Weights live in their own oak chest, nested in order, large to small. He lifts each gently and checks the numbers stamped into their tops. Whole pounds, then halves, then quarters, dwindling to the neat stack of tiny riders that live in a shallow tray. One by one, he sets them on the left pan, then the right, feeling for the way the beam meets its center line. The pointer eases to stillness. He notes the comfort of that stillness as a musician loves a note settling true. On the counter sits a slate. He rubs it with a damp rag and draws two thin lines with chalk to make today's first columns. Seller, buyer, wait. There is another column that has no label. It is for notes that only the room needs to remember. Rind dap, will nicked, balance raised for breeze. His quill lies beside a small bottle of iron gall ink. He will use the quill for the ledger and the chalk for the slate. Both write the same truth in different voices. Outside, porters have begun to place wheels in neat lanes. Their hats are pale straw-colored bands at their shoulders mark the company they serve. They work in pairs with long carrying barrows that ride at hip height slung from their straps. The boards of the barrow are rubbed with tallow so wheels slide without catching. When two men walk with the same small sway, the cheeses float between them as if obeying a tide only they can feel. He steps onto the threshold to mark the start. A hand finds the little bell rope, and the bell answers once clear and neat, not a shout, just a signal to set hands to their tools. The square draws in a breath and releases it as movement. Sellers lift cloths from stacks. Buyers loosen the ties of their purses but do not hurry. Markets like this one work best when time is round and wide. The first two porters shoulder in with a barrow. On it sit two wheels rinds the color of straw. Brine pearls at their edges from an early morning wash. Each is stamped with the maker's mark, a tidy flower, a pair of initials, a circle with a petal shape. The weighmaster nods to the sellers, then to the buyer's man, and gestures to the beam. He sets a square of clean linen on each pan. It keeps brass from tasting the rinds and keeps rinds from tasting brass. He lifts the first wheel with both hands, palms flat, and centers it on the pan. The beam tips, predictable and willing. He starts with a heavy weight, then a lighter one, then the little riders, letting the beam climb toward level. The pointer hovers, then slides back, then steadies. He waits for his favorite tiny moment, the breathless pause when nothing moves and truth has the floor. Numbers are not poetry, yet in this room they have rhythm. He calls the weight softly, chalks it onto slate, and then writes it in the ledger with his small upright hand. The buyer's man nods without looking up. He is listening for the next wheel. Outside, hooves clack as a cart crosses the bridge. The sound moves through the room like a thought and is gone. The second wheel comes to the pan with a faint sigh. This one is a shade darker, likely older by a few weeks. He repeats the dance of brass and pointer and rider. Equal again. He notes the pair as a lot and writes the seller's village. Hill south. Milk from cows that graze chalky ground. He does not need to say it. He simply writes the name, and anyone who reads it will taste the season. Between wangs, he checks the little spirit level set into the beam's plank. The bubble sits in its circle. It is a simple device, a glass tube and a drop of air, yet it keeps fairness from drifting. He feels for a draft with the back of his hand. A shutter is tilted in by a breath. He adjusts it so moving air will go over the beam rather than across it. A balance can be honest and still be tempted by wind. Practice is how one teaches honesty to ignore whispers. A porter stands to one side scraping a smear of brine from the barrow board with a wooden spatula. He scours with salt and a rag. The weighmaster approves with a look. Clean boards help keep rinds clean. Sand from the square clings to damp surfaces. Sand must not come near the pans. He points to the boot brush by the door, and the porter grins, understanding, and scrubs his soles. Rituals protect more than the floor. Once in a while, a buyer asks for a trim. He will lift a knife with a rounded tip, cut a narrow ribbon from the rind's edge, and lay it on a clean tile for inspection. The buyer's man presses it with a thumb. Firmness tells a story too. He may sniff. He may not. There is no drama. Agreement is a slow nod. If the ribbon is too soft, the buyer will request a younger lot or a different salt. If the ribbon is perfect, they will ask that lot to be weighed as a pair again and moved along. He stamps each wheel's mark into his book by number. The market keeps stamps locked in a little drawer, iron devices with long handles and small dies at the ends. The stamp is not for the cheese, it is for the paper that proves the way. He ink pads the die, turns it once to check the face, and presses down. A crisp mark joins the row. When seller and buyer return home, the mark will say, "This was seen here. It stood on our pans. It stood level." A small kettle sits on a trivet near the office stove. Steam curls from under its lid. A thin cup and a packet of roasted beans wait beside it. Coffee here is simple and not sweet, just enough to steady a hand. He pours a little and leaves it to cool. Hot cups and precise scales are poor friends. He sips when the bean is empty. Outside, the square has become a garden of low mounds. Wheels are stacked too high on clean cloths. Voices rise and fall, but there is no sharpness. Brass weights clink, chuck scritches, paper whispers. A dog sleeps where a patch of sun stretches toward the edge of the wog. A child counts the boards in a porter's barrow and loses track and starts again, delighted to lose and delighted to start. The morning opens like a ledger page turned. There will be many lots, and each will teach the same lesson. Fairness is not a feeling, it is a method. The weighmaster wipes his hands, lifts the next wheel, and feels its temperature, not with the intellect but with the parts of the palm that know about milk and salt and time. Mid-morning gathers without hurry. Light grows rounder. The square loosens its first chill and finds a steady pace. Wheels come in pairs and trios, yellow as straw, pale as cream, sometimes a deeper gold that hints at age. Porters move with their measured sway. The barrows whisper over sand. The weighhouse doorway frames the drift of hats and boards like a tide that keeps arriving. The weighmaster works as the room expects him to work. A cloth down. A wheel placed. A glance at the knife edge. A weight chosen by habit and refined by feel. He prefers to start a little shy of level and then rise to it. That way the pointer's last small climb is a friendly agreement rather than a fall crocted. He adds a rider and watches the pointer hesitate at the mark. It trembles as if thinking. He lets it think. Then it rests. Chuck taps the slate. The ledger takes its proper shape. Seller's name, village, lot number. To neat columns of figures. He draws a thin line under each lot when finished, a gesture that tells the day where one story ends and another begins. The quill's nib makes a tiny dry sound. Ink pools in letters and dries to a gray-brown that will not fade soon. Now and then, the bell above the door gives a brief note when he draws its rope. It is not to hurry anyone. It is simply to keep the square in step. He rings when a weighing begins and once again when a weighing ends, so those waiting know where they are in the day. Outside, a boy echoes the tone by tapping the side of a barrel with a stick, not to be loud, just to be part of the pattern. A small breeze tries the room. It comes through the open shutter with a polite hand. The beam feels it and shows it with a tiny sway. The weighmaster sets a laugh across the window so air climbs the wall and not the pans. He lays a coin on the spirit levels frame to test whether the bubble wavers with drafts or with the floor. It does not waver. Satisfied, he nods once and goes on. A farmer with a weathered beard stands near the door. His cap is folded into his pocket. His hair looks like straw in shade. He rubs his palms together not from cold but from old habit. When his turn comes, he sets his lot before the porters with careful hands. He watches the beam as if he built it himself. When the pointer steadies, he allows himself a small smile. The weighmaster notes that smile and adds a tiny dot beside the figure in the ledger. It means good temper, a private mark that helps him remember who prefers to return here. Another lot arrives with the rind nicked where a board rubbed. He wipes the spot with a damp cloth, then dries it with a bit of linen that lives folded in the drawer for this purpose. If a rind is broken deep, he records it. Today it is only a scuff. He points to the porter's strap and rubs a finger where leather meets wood. The porter sees, understands, and knots a strip of cloth around the board to keep the edge tame. The room likes small fixes that last. A cart rattles over the bridge stones closer than before. The beam answers with a brief tremor. The pointer slides away from true, then returns of its own will. The weighmaster waits rather than rush. When the pointer's small dance finishes, he touches the beam with 2 fingers, not to correct it, but to thank it for coming back. His hands are precise without being proud. On a side table sits a narrow tray of little brass riders shaped like thin discs with slots. He uses them often. Their weight is small, but their work is exact. Between customers, he wipes the tray with a cloth scented with a hint of oil and orange peel. The scent is faint and clean. It keeps dust shy and keeps the riders from tarnish. The room smells mostly of straw and salt, but under that lives a thread of citrus that feels like order. A baker's boy ducks his head around the doorframe and sets a paper-wrapped bundle on the counter. Inside rest small rolls still warm, their tops scattered with caraway. The weighmaster nods thanks and slides a coin across. He will tear the rolls later and share a heel with the porter who steadies the door when wind asks for it. He does not eat over the pans. He eats by the open shutter with his back to the beam, so crumbs and business never meet. A buyer's man asks for a recheck on a number. The weighmaster does not mind. He lifts the empty pan's cloth, brushes the brass circle with his sleeve, and resets the weights from the beginning rather than simply touching what is already there. The repeat comes to the same place. He draws a small tick on the slate beside the figure to show a second weighing agreed with the first. The buyer's man relaxes his shoulders. Trust lies in repeated exactness. There is a ritual for printing the market ticket. He selects a narrow strip of paper cut that morning. He writes the lot, the total weight, the fee, and the date. He presses the ticket against the desk so the paper rests flat. Then he takes the little die with the market sign, inks it, and stamps the bottom. The paper accepts the mark with a dry kiss. He blows once across it and hands it to the seller. The strip disappears into a cap or a pouch. Some then fold it and tuck it beneath a hatband, where warmth keeps the paper from cracking. When a cloud passes over the square, the room cools enough that the bean's plank shrugs a fraction. Wood expands and rests with the weather. He knows this and allows it. He checks the knife edges again with his eye level with the bean, not from above. He watches how they seat. He places his thumbnail at the end of the pointer's scale and sees that it meets the same scratch as an hour ago. The scratch is worn smooth. It has known many mornings. A young porter with new straps watches the process closely. His hat sits a little crooked. The weighmaster glances at him and then at the door. The boy understands and steps aside to clear sand from his boots once more. The weighhouse has few words, but it has signs that carry meaning. A broom leans near the step. A pan of water waits for cloths. A wooden wedge holds the door when wind rises. Each tool has its place, and because each tool has its place, the day moves without friction. There is a kind of quiet that follows good work. It is not silence. It is the calm that comes when motions repeat and choices are small and correct. The bean dips and lifts. Chalk marks grow. The bell speaks now and then. Somewhere in the square a violin tries a scale and then gives up. Somewhere else a woman laughs once and covers her mouth as if laughter were a draught that might disturb the pans. At the close of the hour, he sets the last weighed pair on a porter's board and touches the rim of one wheel. It is slightly warmer than the other. Sun finds rinds differently in the lanes outside. He writes nothing. He simply notes it for himself and for the way the lot may ripen. There is hospitality in noticing. He adds a thumbprint of wax to the ledger's ribbon so the page will be easy to find later. He sets his cup by the window and looks across the square. More wheels wait like moons on a tiled sea. He feels the simple satisfaction of a bean at rest and a number true. Noon gathers with a soft brightness, and the bell gives a clean, round note that rolls across the square like a coin across a table. Porters answer with their practice trot, boards slung by thick ropes over their shoulders, hats held by narrow chin straps so they will not leap with each step. The weighhouse doorway swallows and releases them in rhythm. Sand hushes beneath clogs. The bean finds its measured breath again and again. The weighmaster unlocks the small fee chest with a key on a ribbon around his neck. The chest is oak, rubbed smooth at the corners by many Saturdays. Inside, narrow compartments keep coins calm, stoovers and doits in tidy nests, a few heavier pieces tucked under a sliding panel. He sets the chest at the end of the desk where sun does not fall, so metal stays cool and fingers stay clean. Each weighing adds a small fee, noted in a quick column to the right of the day's figures. He does not count aloud. The sound of metal is count enough. The first surge belongs to growers from two villages that share a canal. Their wheels carry the same maker's stamp, but one lot is a shade paler, having spent a shorter time in brine. The buyers want to divide the whole, to take even shares of two ripenesses. The weighmaster nods. draws a neat rectangle on the slate to stand for the lots, and writes initials at the corners. He will split by weight, not by eye. 2 wheels onto the pan. Balance. Note the figure. Draw a line. 2 more wheels. Balance again. The pointer's small nod decides fairness. When a pair is unlike, he marries a lighter wheel to a heavier cousin until both sides sing the same quiet chord. For the final adjustment, a buyer suggests trimming a thumb's width from a rind. The weighmaster opens a drawer and lifts a long, thin knife with a horn handle. He does not slice at once. He weighs the pair again and shows the pointer leaning the gentlest amount. Then, with a cloth beneath the wheel, and the knife drawn slow and true, he removes a neat crescent that smells of salt and warm straw. The piece is placed carefully on the other pan until the pointer meets the scratch exactly. It is not taking and giving, it is teaching two halves to agree. The trim goes to the seller as courtesy, all nod. Chuck taps a small tick in the margin, split to content, a mark he uses only on days when division is an art. The bell speaks once more, a short reminder rather than a command. The weighmaster drinks a mouthful of coffee that has settled from morning. It tastes of tin and roast and a little sweet from the end of a sugar cone. He tears one of the baker's rolls into 2 plainer halves and shares the larger with the porter, who steadies the door. The crust breaks with a small sigh. Caraway rises. He chews without hurry, shoulder turned from the bean, eyes still companion to the pointer. A merchant in a dark coat steps forward with a mixed lot from his warehouse. The wheels are stamped in different months, the marks impressed with different hands. He wants one total weight, and then a record dividing the lot by maker's stamp, so his accounts will sit straight at home. This is longer work. The weighmaster lays 3 thin tickets on the desk, inks the stamps, one with a small fish, one with a crown, one with a simple ring, and places a mark on each slit to match each stamp. He weighs, records, and places each wheel on the proper cloth according to its sign. The porters learn his eyes and place their boards where his look falls. Soon the desk holds 3 growing totals, each a slow column of numbers that will travel with the merchant back to his shelves. A brief gust pushes the shutter. The bean sways, no more than a breath. In that moment he does nothing. He lets the sway ease. Then, for the next weighing, he adds a tiny brass rider, not to correct for wind, but to bring the pointer's final pause into the center of the scratch, where it likes to live. He knows the beans moves like a neighbor's steps on the stair. Between lots, he checks the fee chest again, sifting coins with a flat palm so the edges sing against one another. He stacks 2overs and 5s, then 10s, with a narrow twist of paper to hold each stack neat. A boy from the town office will come at day's end with a canvas pouch and an iron seal. The bundles will make his binder lie flat. On a scrap the weighmaster notes how much small coin to keep back for tomorrow. The number is simple and good. Now arrives a farmer with a cart whose axle has been generous with dust. The wheels on his board carry a rind the color of candle wax and cut marks like neat scars where each wheel was turned by the same careful hand. The weighmaster sets one on the cloth and runs a finger along the side. He is not checking weight with touch. He is reading the story in the rind R's on the shelf, the brine, the brush. He sets the pair, adds the standard weight, then reaches for one of the little riders and slides it on with the motion of a sigh. The pointer comes home. He writes the figure and, beside the name, a small circle with a dot, a private mark that means well kept. When buyers cluster too close, the porter nearest the door lays a hand like a placard on the door lintel. It is the signal that brings a respectful step back and a lane for air. The room knows that grain dust and warm breath together can make the air heavy, and heavy air makes the beam lazy. The lane returns the room to balance and gives the pointer room to breathe. At midday's crown, the square outside spreads its picnic smells, onions warming in a nearby pot, a curl of herring brine from a stall that keeps a bucket under the table for tidy work, a gentle note of malt from a tavern cask lifted in the cool. The waymaster is not hungry now. He has eaten his roll and saved the second for later. He tightens the ribbon on his key and pushes the fee chest an inch deeper on the desk, away from an edge that has seen elbows and April rain. A buyer proposes weighing a wheel without its cloth wrapper to be sure know what has been tucked under by accident or haste. The weighmaster nods and unwinds the cloth himself, slow and even, so rinds do not snag. The cloth is dry and clean. He folds it into a square no larger than the palm and sets it aside with the kindness that tools notice. He weaves again. The number is the same. He draws a very small check mark. The buyer smiles with his mouth and his eyes both. The bell gives a longer note, a ribbon of sound rather than a coin. For a moment the square pauses one beat in a song you could tap with a finger on a desk and never lose your place. Then movement resumes. Porters sway. A cart passes. A gull examines a rind, thinks better of it, and takes the air. From time to time, the weighmaster turns the bean empty and lets it rest on its own weight, watching the pointer choose the same place twice, then a third time. A bean that returns to itself is a friend. He runs a soft brush along the knife edges to keep grit from pretending to be gravity. The brush has a horn handle and badger hair, never used on anything else. It lives in a narrow sleeve so dust cannot claim it either. A man from the guild steps in and asks for a check weighing on a lot already sold, an old courtesy for the sake of calm. The weighmaster obliges, drawing the lot's ticket from a tin marked with a red line. He reads the figure silently, then rebuilds the measure weight for weight. When the pointer meets the scratch, the guild man nods once and scratches his ear with the corner of the ticket, thinking of nothing in particular. Trust that has been aired like linen smells clean. As the sun leans past its high point, the room's light softens and finds new angles on brass and wood. The beam does not change its mind. It continues. The ledger's right-hand column lengthens. The fee chest quietly adds its metal weight to the day. A fly considers the ink bottle, changes its mind, and chooses the window instead, where light makes a warm net. The weighmaster straightens the little stacks of riders and sets the smallest to side by side, because together they are the friend he uses most. He scratches a note to himself, oil pen pivots in winter, a reminder for later in the year when the air turns close, and wood asks for kindness. Afternoon leans in with a paler light, as if the sun puts on a linen shirt. The square hums at a lower pitch. Buyers speak in shorter sentences. Sellers fold their empty cloths to the size of a pocketbook. The bell keeps time with long, unhurried notes, each strike rounding off the hour like a finger smoothing flour on a board. A small shower arrives from the canal without argument. First, a scent-wet robe. and cool brick, then the soft pepper of drops on cobbles. The weighmaster closes the windward shutter to a thumb's width and slides a tarred canvas over the doorway lintel. Porters set their boards on their edges to keep the ropes dry. The beam bare to the room gets a thin wipe with a cloth kept for this moment only. He lifts each brass pan with 2 fingers, turns it like a plate, and let drops find the floor, not the knife edges. Damp air gives wood a slower breath. He unlocks the narrow oak box that holds the guild standards, a row of brass weights with clean shoulders, and the little town mark struck proud on each face. He sets the smallest pair on the pan and lets the beam come to itself. The pointer leans the smallest hair toward the closed shutter. He moves a rider no heavier than a walnut down the beam by 1 notch and watches the needle choose center twice, then a 3rd time, as if making up its mind politely. The correction is written in tiny script at the bottom of the slate, a private weather note, the sort numbers like to keep. Outside, the shower freckles the cheese rinds a shade darker and leaves them shining like polished leather. Sellers drape oiled cloth for a minute, then lift it when the patter turns to the memory of patter. Steam rises from the cobbles where the drops meet warm stone. A gull shakes itself and thinks kinder thoughts about a rind it refused before. Work resumes in the softened air. A farmer from a clay district brings wheels with shallow ridges on one face, the mark of the reed mats where they rested in aging. He asks for a full tally and a separate figure for those made in the hot month, so the priest's order sits straight. The weighmaster nods, spreads a fresh cloth, and makes 2 columns. He weighs, writes, and places each wheel on the left or the right by a small chalk dot on its heel, the oven month pressed there long ago by a hand that liked even work. A porter returns with a board and a wet rope. Without a word, the weighmaster passes him the cloth that lives over the shutter bar. The porter rubs the rope once, twists it, and hangs it from a peg by the door so it will not share its damp with the beam. He knows these courtesies keep time as surely as the bell. Between lots, the weighmaster lifts the ink bottle and settles it deeper in its nest of sand. Afternoon brings a trickle of cooler air under the door. Ink grows shy in such draughts and forgets to flow. He turns the quill, trims the nib with 2 quiet nips of the penknife, and writes again, the letters thin at first, then willing. He blots with a square of wool that smells faintly of lamp oil and elderflowers from last midsummer. A brewer's man arrives in a coat that keeps the rain standing in little beads. He brings a list of small wheels needed for crews on the river barges. The order is simple, not too sharp, not too soft, good skin, good weight. The weighmaster opens a drawer and lifts a narrow tool shaped like a tiny corkscrew with a wooden button at the top. He turns it into a wheel's rind, draws out a neat core the size of a pea, and presses it back in place. He tastes the touch left on his thumb, salt, hay, the quiet of a cool cellar. He smiles with 2 lines beside his mouth and gestures toward 4 wheels. The brewer's man nods, happy to let another man's tongue be his measure. The shower passes. Light returns without edge. A ribbon of gulls moves like a slow seam over the canal and away toward the fields. Someone laughs once. The laugh becomes a cough, then stops. The market's noise finds its old level. A last-minute bargaining match approaches with a courteous bustle. 2 buyers want the same lot, both willing, both wishing not to overpay, both with errands elsewhere for the late afternoon. The Waymaster does what he always does when he can see the day poised on a narrow point. He slows the room. He adjusts nothing with his hands. He adjusts time. He weaves one pair, writes, pauses, breathes. He weaves one more pair, writes, lifts his eyes to the closed shutter, as though listening for rain that has already gone. The buyers follow his pace. Their own words grow simpler. A number is offered. Another number answers. A small weight clinks onto the pan as if it votes for calm. In 3 measures of the pointer's swing, agreement appears, thin as a new moon, enough to sail by. Chalk draws to short lines. A porter sets the boards. The lot lifts, leaves, and the room loosens one notch. The fee chest receives its portion. Coins murmur into their rows. He adds 1 sheet of paper to the stack of receipts and ties the day's bundle with a cord rubbed once with wax so it lays flat and does not tangle. He writes a short sum at the bottom, the total of fees before the guild share. He underlines it with a line that is not quite straight and smiles at the small honesty of it. Outside, the square slips toward its end-of-day posture. The stall with onions covers its basket. The chalkboard at the tavern door takes a new number for the evening pot. The herring bucket is emptied and rinsed with a pail poured from shoulder height so the water makes a clean fan. The bell rope is coiled a little looser, ready for the final ring. Back inside, the Waymaster checks the knife edges once more. He uses the badger brush lightly, then runs the pad of his index finger near the edge, not on it, just enough to feel the air move where steel ends and space begins. He turns the beam bare and sets the lock pin near but not in the hole that fixes it for the night, a small readiness in case one more cart breathes at the doorway. He looks at the pointer. It rests precisely where it should, like a needle on the center of a button. A boy from the town office appears with the canvas pouch and the iron seal, striped like a candy cane with old wax. They exchange a few polite words about the rain and about the messenger who slipped at the bridge and found he could juggle 3 apples without meaning to. The Waymaster counts the fee stacks by touch and weight more than sight and lays them in the pouch. The iron seal closes with a modest click. The boy leaves a receipt folded twice, crease sharp as a book's first page. The light in the doorway thins. One last seller appears with a single wheel, shy as a new apprentice. The Waymaster sets it on the cloth. He weighs, writes, and adds a little mark next to the maker's name, a dot over a dash that he uses when he hopes to see someone again next week. The seller nods with a mouth that cannot quite hide pride. The porter holds the door as if it were a habit older than the stones. The bell rope lifts for the final time today. The note that follows is broad, affectionate, and round enough to roll to the edge of town. It lingers in the Wayhouse doorway like a guest who knows when to leave and wants to say one more kind thing first. The Wayhouse enters its evening posture with the easy certainty of a book that knows how it likes to be closed. The Waymaster reaches for the long linen cloth that has lived on the peg since spring and draws it over the beam with both hands, palms flat to smooth the air out from under the fabric. The cloth drapes neatly around the fulcrum, softening corners, turning steel into a hill under snow. He tucks each brass pan into its nest on the lower shelf, felt pads facing up, so their wrens do not learn accidental music in the night. He lifts the drawer of Ryder's small sliding weights with dug-out backs like thimbles and returns them to their order. 1s, 2s, 5s, Tens, each piece on its little peg, each peg with a clean shadow behind it. He presses the drawer gently until the latch clicks, then opens it again, just to be sure, and enjoys the quiet promise of the second click. Promises are a kind of weight. They help keep a day level. The slate waits with its forest of marks. He takes the damp wool pad and begins at the corner farthest from the door, wiping figures away by families, leaving ghosts for a breath, then none at all. What stays is rhythm, the memory of columns, the steadiness of hands, the certainty that numbers came and nested and were carried off properly in the ledger. He finishes the last page of the day with a thin line and ties the silk ribbon around the section, with a careful square knot that will come loose kindly tomorrow. He pinches the lamp wick with brass tongs so the flame steps smaller, but does not sulk. In the dimmer light, the room appears to breathe out. Dust returns to corners. The bean's linen cover looks like a folded sail asleep on trestles. The smell of warmed oak and cooled brass is the last scent of work. Outside, the canal gives back its clean water smell as the air cools. He walks his closing circuit without hurry, door bolts whirled, window shutter set, lock pin eased through the small iron eye that fixes the beam, badger brush hung, penknife folded, quill rinsed and stood in the jar with tips up like slender reeds. He lifts the little box of gilt standards and slides it into the safe behind the panel, then turns the key a quarter and brings it back out. A habit that lets the lock's innards decide where they like to rest. When the final bell note rolls across the square, he answers it with a small private nod, as if two old colleagues have agreed to meet again in the morning. He slips on his coat wool brushed smooth where it knows his shoulders and gathers the empty cloth, now folded to the size of a loaf. The coin pouch for petty change rests in its drawer. The sealed fee pouch has already gone. The weighhouse is a tidy cupboard that has eaten and is pleased. He steps into the square. Evening has lifted the color from the stones and given them a thin pearl skin. The last porter ties his board ropes with the knot his father taught him, a knot that aunties with a single idea. An apple woman counts her coins twice by feel. A boy chases a hat that the canal breeze has opinions about, then catches it and bows to the air for being a good sport. Above the roofs, a smudge of smoke leans the same way the windmills beyond town lean when they feel a night wind with a polite hand on their sails. The waymaster walks home the long way by quiet preference. He likes the street under the old lime trees because the leaves hold a little daylight longer, as if saving a crumb for a friend. He likes the narrow bridge where his clogs find the exact middle plank. It gives a hollow note that belongs only to his pace. He likes the baker's corner, even at this hour, because a crust still speaks on the racks inside, crisp sighs from loaves cooling their thoughts. He pauses at the canal railing and takes a minute. He owes himself. The water folds small lights into longer ones. A boat rocks against a tire fender with a rubbery whisper. Farther off, a door shuts, then another, each sound wearing soft shoes. A dog makes a statement and revises it into a suggestion. The sky holds a low, even blue like old linen. The first star is not a star but a planet that forgives the mistake. He rubs a coin between finger and thumb, an unconscious habit when there have been many numbers, and feels its honest ridge, the town mark, the king's face softened by 1,000 other hands. He turns toward his street, the one with the green shutter 3 houses in. The step at his door is stone rounded by a century of souls. It greets his clogs like a friend who knows the joke before it is told. He opens to warmth kept for him, Someone has set a plate under cloth. Cheese waits crackly skin, tender heart next to 2 slices of bread, a bit of onion, and the end of a pear. A crock holds beer that has gone quiet and is exactly right that way. He loosens the top button of his coat, hangs it on the peg that knows its weight, and washes his hands in the basin by the window, water colder than conversation. At the table, he eats as a man eats whose mouth has been busy all day, not with words, but with a pencil held between lips while 2 hands did something else. He chews and hears the day again. The bell, the pointer, the clink of small brass. The careful scraping of a slate. He tastes a cellar, a hint of nut. Bread offers its soft crumb, onion its honest edge. He folds the cloth again, sets the plate by the basin, and leaves the room the way a bird leaves a branch lightly, and with a sense of return built in. He checks the small box on the shelf, the one that holds his private riders, the tune he remembers when numbers go thin, the line in a psalm that sits well in the ribs, the little prayer that nothing breaks tonight that a cloth and a penknife cannot mend in the morning. In the sleeping room, he wins the clock until it says thank you in its deep wooden voice. Clocks, too, like to be fed at dusk. Before he sleeps, he sits by the window with the curtain ajar and lets the street sing its last measures. Shoes pass, not many. A cartwheel ticks once where the rim met a stone corner too often, and has learned to complain about it. Somewhere, a cat insists on a point and then forgives that, too. The air cools his face. He considers tomorrow's weather in the way men who live with balances do, a fresh breeze on the cheek, a smell of damp straw, a stiffness in knuckles that says the morning will begin sharp and end kindly. He thinks of the beam moving to center, of numbers finding their place, of ports on the river accepting what the scales delivered, of loaves and wedges and small comfort on many boards. The measure of a day is often a quiet thing. He undresses with the economy of an old friend toward his clothes, shaking out sleeves so tomorrow's shoulders find easy rooms. He lies down. Sheets smell of soap and wind. The pillow has his patience in it. In the square, the last lamp burns like a faithful punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. When he closes his eyes, the pointer in his mind chooses the middle and rests there exactly on the line. And as the city leans into its slow, even sleep, we'll step away from brass and bell and follow evening farther east, where stone stairs hold cool air and a tender's rope brings water into the quiet of a Rajasthani stepwell at dusk. The day has folded itself small. In the last light, dust hangs like a thin veil over the lane, and the stepwell sits at its end as it always has, a mouth of cool geometry opening downward. The tender arrives with the same modest bundle he carries each evening, a coil of rope that has learned his shoulder, a small brass vial with a dab of oil, a clay-hooded lamp, a flat wicker fan, a reed skimmer with a ring bound near its tip, and a cloth-wrapped packet of chalk. He pauses at the top landing to greet the place in the quiet way of long friendship, palm on the stone rail, breath easing. From above, the well is a pattern more than a thing squares, and triangles shadow, and stone trading places as the sun drops. Broad flights of steps fall away in mirrored runs, each terrace holding a ledge, each ledge holding a niche, each niche remembering the warmth of a lamp. The water at the far bottom keeps its own color, deepening from olive to ink as the breeze dies. Even now in late light, the air that rises from down below is cool, carrying a scent that is not quite earth and not quite rain, but something between. He lowers the bundle to the first landing and unknots it with fingers that do not rush. The rope has been plied by hand. Its twist shows palm and patience. He tests it with a small tug, not because he doubts, but because the rope enjoys being asked. The lamp comes next. He sets the clay saucer on the stone step, trims the cotton wick with a nail-clean pinch, and feeds it a little ghee from a horn spoon. When he touches flame to it, the wick accepts without fuss, a small flame spreading its ankle of light around the saucer. He lifts the lamp and walks it to the first niche. The rim of the niche is rubbed smooth by years of setting and lifting. He knows which ones catch a shy draft and need their lamps a finger's depth farther in. A lamp at each turn keeps the shadows polite. He lights two more and sets them on the second landing, then lifts the coil and begins the long walk down, counting his steps the way a singer marks time. The steps are broad and shallow, sized for slow feet and for the narrow water pots people carry against their hips in daylight. His soles recognize certain stones, one with a shallow cup worn by a saint's heel, one with a hairline crack that never grows, one that keeps a memory of the mason's chisel like tiny ripples left by a retreating tide. Halfway down, he stops at the pulley beam. The beam is teak, varnished by hands and seasons, spanning a small gap where the stair dips toward the well's inner wall. A bronze wheel turns on an iron pin. He rubs the wheel with an oilcloth until it finds its soft, quiet spin, then pulls the rope through the groove to test the run. It slides like a long breath. The leather bucket waits on its hook oval, stitched with rawhide, patched where the rim once split on a sharp corner. He checks the laces, tightens a knot, and lowers the bucket until he feels it kiss the water with a sound he knows alike, round sound like a palm clapping nothing. While it fills, he leans over the rail and listens. Water, at rest, speaks more in weight than in words, but a listening ear can hear the small trebles that trickle through the inlet channel, the quiet return around a submerged step, the tapping rise of a bubble from the stone. He brings the bucket up hand over hand. The rope leaves a faint line across his skin, not a complaint, only a signature. He pours the first bucket into the side channel that runs to the garden cisterns above, watching the surface fold and open as the flow takes it away. A pair of bats turns once under the beam and then decides on the empty corner of the sky. The first star shows, and with it the darkening midges begin their small dance above the water's skin. He uncaps the brass vial and shakes a single drop of oil into the bucket, then runs his hand across the surface of the well in a long, patient arc, letting a thin sheen spread. The sheen quiets the scatter of insects without drama. Their dance moves elsewhere, toward the warm niches with lamps. He places the vial back in its cloth and sets a lamp a little higher, out of their line. He works without hurry, a rhythm made of small tasks. Lower, lift, pour, set. Each bucket rises with the same little swaying song, water knocking politely at the leather. The channel's lip wears a groove from years of this kind of evening. On the third landing he takes up the reed skimmer. Leaves have found their way down from the neem by the upper rail. He gathers them with a single smooth pass and shakes the skimmer on the step, hearing the soft wet patter of leaf on stone. A dragonfly to sleep he for speed sits on the rail and adjusts its queer sails. When the water level looks even and pleased, he turns to the stair with broom and fan. Dust is a traveling guest in a place like this. It comes to sleep on the low steps and wakes at every footfall. He fans the dust forward with easy strokes, guiding it into a corner where a cloth bag will catch it later. A thread of spiderweb stretches from a lamp niche to the next. He breaks it with a fingertip apology and winds it around the broom's end. A row of tiny ants explores the mortar line where two stones meet. He takes a breath, makes a small path with the fan, and watches them choose the detour without anxiety. By the time he reaches the bottom terrace, the lamps above have stacked their shallow bowls of light into a gentle ladder. Down here the air is almost cold. He kneels and scoops water into a bronze cup from the bucket that hangs ready, then holds the cup against the lamp. Clarity shows itself as the flame's reflection trembled but intact. He sips, tasting stone and season and a faint sweetness that belongs to unseen roots. He tips the rust into a clay basin set by the landing for visitors who like to rinse their hands before climbing. The basin has a crack that holds a line of wet even when the surface dries. He touches it with the pad of his finger, a note for tomorrow's patch. On the lowest wall, chalk marks climb from a dark line that says monsoon reached here in last year's abundant weeks. Next to it a fainter mark, 2 hands lower, tells another year's story. He takes his packet of chalk and renews the bright line for the present season, drawing it clean and straight. Chalk grates lightly, a sound like a moth's idea of thunder. He underscores the new mark with a small dot and a date that only he reads. It is not a census, it is a conversation. He sits for a moment on the cool step with his back to the carved pillar. The stone holds no heat now. In daylight, carved panels on the higher wall show little gods, flowing vines, and a lion that looks pleased with its duty. Down here the carvings are simple, clean planes, edges that catch lamplight and make wine-colored shadows. He rubs the rope again where the twist has loosened near a splice, and hums a little under his breath, not a tune but a line that rises and falls like a water level in a quiet month. He lifts the bucket once more, pours into the garden channel until he hears the answering trickle from above. Somewhere at the top, a clay pot is filling, drip by clean drip. In the morning, that water will wake mint leaves and a marigold border. For now the channel's thin music is enough. He takes the cloth from his shoulder, wipes the rail, and hangs the cloth from a peg to dry. One lamp sputters. He trims its wick with a sliver of bamboo until it chooses an even flame. The other lamps glow as if they are satisfied with their work. The tender gathers his tools into a neater bundle for the walk back up. He has not finished. There are still ledges to sweep, a tiny weep in a seam to dress with lime and a fingertip, and a coil of rope to teach back into round. But he allows himself a pause, a kind of bow to the place and to the hour. The stepwell answers with its own bow, a small echo of his own breath returning to him from the water's skin, balanced, measured, and calm. He begins with the scene that has been softly weeping since last month's brief rain. The leak is not urgent, it is simply insistent, a thread of damp that smudges the stone's clean color. He opens his small kit, a shallow clay bowl with a lid the color of almond shell, and lifts out a thumb-sized lump of slate lime wrapped in cloth. Next to it sits a pinch of sifted grit and a walnut of fine clay. He crushes the lime with the rounded back of a spoon, adds 2 spoon tips of grit and a quiet bit of clay, then dips water from the basin and stirs with a reed stem until the paste turns smooth and agreeable. Lime remembers its work quickly. He gives it the patience of 10 breaths. With the same reed, He presses paste into the seam, not forcing it but showing it a path. The reeds cut and makes a neat line, and he follows the wet brightness along the crack, smoothing with a damp fingertip to seal the edge. He leaves a small bulge where the join deepens, knowing it will shrink as it cures. A fine dust of lime rests on his knuckle. He brushes it away, then rinses the reed, and sets the bowl where the draft cannot argue with it. The pulleyed beam gets another moment of care. He holds the wheel into fingers and spins it once more. It turns in a bore, then stills exactly where he expects. The iron pin has a place that prefers a drop of oil at day's end. He gives it one, rolling the oil with the tip of a cloth until it stays in its cup. The leather bucket he rubs with the flat of his palm, warming the rim so it remains supple. Leather forgets if you ignore it, and this bucket is a good listener when spoken to briefly each night. On the lowest landing, he draws the broom across the step's edge, 3 slow passes that lift crumbs of grit. He carries them in the broom's throat to a little dust hole in the corner, then covers the hole with a towel so the night will not scatter his tidy arrangements. A moth comes to the lamp as if to read the wick. It circles twice and decides on a shadow under the rail instead. The tender moves the lamp the width of his thumb to keep the glass-clear wings away from trouble, then returns to the channel that feeds the garden cisterns and runs his palm along the lip. Ouchy like a warm, rough place, his palm removes both. From the bottom terrace he climbs 1 flight to the inlet, where a carved chute brings seasonal runoff down from the higher rock. In dry weeks the chute holds only a memory of movement, but the memory has bits of leaf and a sneer of clay. He kneels and lifts a spoonful of that sneer free, setting it aside for the mortar bowl. Clay from the very place often agrees best with the seam nearby. He slides 2 fingers inside the chute to feel for a chip. The stone is sound. He pats it once and pulls his hand back with a little grit under the nails, then cleans his hand with a ribbon of wet cloth tied to the rail for that purpose. On the second terrace a shallow shelf runs along the wall, a place where people leave offerings when the well's patience has been especially kind. Tonight there is a small sprig of holy basil in a shell, a twist of cotton-dyed saffron, and a braid of bright thread. None are heavy, none trouble the stone. He straightens the thread where it has fallen into its own loop, and sets the basil's stem in a thimble of water so it will not wilt before morning. He is not the keeper of prayers, only the keeper of place, but the 2 are neighbors here. The air shifts as evening deepens. Cool slides up the stair as if the well were quietly exhaling. He rolls his shoulders once and feels the night settle on his shawl. A single drop from the repaired seam makes a small oval on the step, then stops. The line has taken its first set. He leaves the patch alone, content with what the stone and paste have decided together. While it firms, he tends to the rope. The rope splice near the lower loop has loosened bushy at the edges from many liftings. He opens his pouch for twine and a bone fit. The fit is a smooth, tapered tool, easy in the hand. He teases the rope strands open and tucks the twine along their lay, drawing it through with gentle insistence, then rolling the splice on his thigh to lay it tight again. He rubs the finished section with a bit of tallow to keep the fibers friendly. When he tests the loop with his weight, it gives him the answer he hoped for, a silent strength, no creak, no small complaint. A soft clink from above announces a visitor. He looks up to see a woman pause at the first turn, an empty brass lotta in her hand. Evening water is a custom as old as the steppes, and the well is generous to quiet feet. He raises his palm in greeting, she mirrors it and, seeing his tools, spread like a small constellation, chooses a landing one level above to fill her pie. He keeps to his work, adding another lamp where the shadow has thickened, giving her space. The pulley speaks twice with the good sound of leather and water, then stills. Her thanks is a nod and a short, smiling breath. The door of night closes behind her steps. He writes nothing of her in his chalk ledger. He writes only the water's things. The chalk packet opens again, and he marks on the pillar the depth the bucket told him tonight, a finger lower than yesterday. The difference is not worry, it is weather written in a slow hand. He rubs the chalk away from his fingertips and lines the date with a straight mark from his reed. The reed leaves a faint wet shine where it touched the stone, then goes dull again as it dries. At the fourth landing he inspects the coping, where a shallow crack has gathered powder. This crack bothers no one yet, but he talks to it anyway with a fingertip. He stirs the mortar bowl, now slightly stiffer, and presses a thread of paste into the hairline with a patience that is almost stillness. He smooths it with a wetted thumb and breathes on the spot once, because his teacher taught him that breath makes the lime remember that it will live in air. He smiles at the old thought and lets the smile pass. He returns to the pulley and draws another bucket, then another, until the channel whispers steadily toward the garden. He counts not in numbers but in the familiar sequence of his own motions: lower, feel, draw, pour, listen so the body remembers and the mind may idle. A small frog sings from the lowest seam where a cool damp suits it. The note is round and occasional, like a bead tapped against wood. He moves the lamp a hand's width to keep the frog in its comfortable dark. Animals find their habits here as people do. Above, the sky has turned to deep indigo. Stars appear where the steps frame them, making long, thin lakes of light between the terraces. He checks the wick lengths again, nipping a blackened bead from one that has grown smoky. The small tongs he carries for this are smooth at their pinch so the wick keeps its dignity. Each lamp returns to its soft, egg yolk glow. The water below echoes those small suns in trembling pieces, and for a moment a well looks like a ladder into stars both ways. He visits the corner where tools rest between seasons. A spare rope lies coiled in a willow basket. He tucks a paper twist of camphor in its center to dissuade insects from taste-testing the fibers. A folded tarp of oilcloth hangs from a peg. He checks the hem with his nail to be sure mice have not made their arguments along the edge. Beside the tarp, the small wooden board holds a shallow groove where he crushes the soot from spent wicks to make a thin black simple ink he uses to freshen the faint numbers on the death stick. He wets the soot with a drop, grinds with a round stone, and paints the numeral for tonight with a brush hair tied into a loop. The mark dries to a modest shine. From the upper stair comes the faintest of breezes scented with coriander from a nearby kitchen. He answers it with a long, easy breath that feels like a door opening in the chest. His bones have learned this hour. They expect the same distances, the same weights, the same small questions asked of stone and rope and water. He takes out his reed again and runs it along the channel lip, more to hear the soft hiss than to change anything. The hiss is content. The garden will drink. He gathers what can be gathered now and leaves what must set. Mortar needs the night. Lamps need watching for a little longer. He sits on the second landing with his back to the wall, tools inside his easy reach, broom, skimmer, vial, chalk-fed cloth. He leans the coil of rope so the twist does not kink. He does not think about finishing. He thinks about doing the next small thing, and then the next. The well teaches this lesson every evening, that care is not a project but a posture. Somewhere, a bronze bell far away notes the hour with a single, round voice. The sound comes down the stair in thin pieces and lays them at his feet. He places his palm on the stone again, the same greeting as when he arrived, except now the stone has his day's warmth and his day's work in it. The patch at the seam has taken. The lamps hold their little fields. The rope is quiet. The water has been heard and has spoken back. He rises without hurry and makes one last slow walk along the landings, as if tucking a blanket's edge. At each niche he watches the flame for the length of a breath. At each step he lifts one piece of stray leaf and sets it in the dust hole. At the pulley he lays the bucket across the rail so the leather will dry evenly, not sag. Then he sits again and lets the well speak in cool, ordinary syllables, a drop, a hush, a line of moving water. The night is not large here, it is the size of stone and lamp and a patient rope. And that is exactly enough. He knows the well by its geometry, first angles that fold into each other like patient hands. On some evenings he counts for pleasure, as if numbers were a quiet chant. 9 steps to the first landing, 11 to the second, a run of 13 to the third, where they are always feels a degree cooler. Tonight he lets himself count again, touching each riser with the side of his foot to feel for any grit that might ask for the broom. The counting does not seek an answer, it keeps him even. Where the water line has slipped, a pale band shows the day's small retreat. He takes the long-handled brush from its hook, coconut fiber bound to a bamboo pole with copper wire, and dips it once to wet the bristles. He lays the brush against the faint ring and coaxes away a bloom of slick green. The brush makes a sound like a soft whisper on stone. He works in arcs. When he lifts the brush, the water beads and clears. The ring becomes a clean thought again. From his cloth pouch he brings out a narrow stoppered vial of sesame oil. He leans over and touches the surface with a single drop. The film spreads in a silver sheen that quiets the tiny scatter of midges near the niche lamps. The drop is not for the water so much as for the night. The night accepts it and grows still by a measure. He rinses the vial's neck, returns it to the pouch with a tap of the stopper, and wipes his finger on the edge of his shawl. At the west inlet a small wicker grill keeps larger leaves from riding the chute. He fingers the weave to be sure the strands are tight, then slides a twig free and lays it in his palm to judge its dampness. It is neither wet nor brittle, just attentive. He nudges the grill a thumb width to square it with the flow, then ties one loose corner with a length of jute twine he keeps looped around his wrist. The knot lies flat and knows its work. The ledge on the third landing holds a series of shallow depressions carved by someone long ago, each cup-sized and easy to the hand. He fills one with water and sets a clay saucer above it, testing the tiny draft that moves between the niche lamps. The saucer's rim shivers almost invisibly. He uses these cups to teach the apprentices when they come our breeze through the stone and how flame and water talk to each other without sound. Tonight there is no apprentice to see still. He watches the saucer settle and feels the small lesson repeat under his breath. He moves to the entrance where a rope hangs from a bell tongue just below the lintel. The rope is frayed where many hands have asked for blessing. He unties the loop, slides off the thin section, and splices in a fresh length of cotton cord, rubbing it with a little beeswax so it will not fuzz and catch soot. He threads the new cord through the tiny hole at the bell's lip, knots, and tugs once. The bell answers with a soft note that does not travel far. It is the right voice for night, here and no further. A clay jar, fat-bellied and gentle, waits behind a step, his jar for sweepings and oddments that can go to the garden soil. He tips a small pan of leaf crumbs into the jar, then sets the pan under the drip from a stone that the masons shaped to carry runoff away from traffic. Each panful tells him how the wall's skin is shedding the day. When the pan is cleaned too soon, the air has dried more than his ledger predicted. He notes things not always in chalk but in habit. But chalk records the obvious. Habit remembers the rest. He checks the depth marker again, not because it has changed, but because reading it twice makes the number belong to him. The stick is cedar, notched and stained at finger-long intervals, with faint numerals he keeps refreshed with his sooting. He sets the tip against the water's skin and listens for the smallest click, a sound so slight that it could be his thought. The surface accepts the wood and makes a ring that opens and fades. He lifts the stick and wipes it from notch to notch with a cloth that keeps its own tally of nights. A small bat slips from a crack higher up and rides the air once around the void before finding an old groove behind a broken cornice. He watches to be sure it settles. In the morning he will brush away the fine dust it leaves, but now he lets the creature hold its dark quiet. The well is a house large enough to include other households: the frog, the moth, the bat, the occasional green lizard asleep like a leaf on a warm stone. Knowing where they favor keeps his broom from surprise. He kneels at a rough patch where many sandals have carved a shallow worry into a tread. From his kit he takes a piece of smooth pumice and a wrapped bundle of flour-fine sand. He spreads a pinch of sand, wetting it with a spoon of well water, and rubs the stone in patient circles. The grit turns to a thin milk that fills the minute scratches, and the pumice rounds the sharpness, until the step becomes the memory of a sharp step instead of the thing itself. He rinses with his palm and dries the tread with the edge of his shawl. He tests it with his bare sole. The stone gives no offense. He smiles into the dark. On the high wall a painted mark from a long-ago monsoon sits far above his reach, a deep red streak that mothers have shown to children for years to explain why the steps go so low. He lifts the lamp and lets the flame graze the old line. Dust blooms, then settles. He does not clean the line. It is a story, not a stain. At intervals, he pauses and merely listens. The sounder of the well is a blend, drip from the patched seam as it gives up its last, the hush of water moving through the garden channel, the tiniest grit testing a step and then being taken away. He learns the well's mood from these sounds. Some nights the well is talkative, like a market after rain. Some nights, like this one, it is the sound of a book closing softly. A pair of sandals appears at the top step, the potter recognizable by the slip lines on his fingers even in poor light. The man lifts a hand and points at his own earthen flask. The keeper returns the greeting and, without speaking, lifts the catch bucket for a draw. He fills the potter's flask, wipes the lip with a damp cloth, and passes it up. The potter touches his forehead to his thumb and thanks and places a small token on the step, a shallow test shard, glazed in a pale celadon, smooth as a pond. The keeper will use it on the tool shelf as a resting place for the oil vial, a tiny green moon given a purpose. He sets the shard where his fingers will find it in the dark on another night. Beside it he arranges a row of pebbles 5 to night, each standing for one completed circuit of the landings. When he reaches the 5th, he will know to sit again. He'd prefer stones to numbers for such counts. Stones wait quietly. On the way down he stops at the warm cupboard he made from 2 old shutters and a curtain of coarse cloth. Inside, a clay towel rests with its edge in a small bowl of water, a simple way to keep a nest of damp for lacquers, plasters, anything that wants a breath of moist air. He slides the fresh patchwork of lime and clay inside for a few moments, letting it take a gentler set before the night's thin dryness has its say. Then he returns it to its seam, strokes the joint once with his thumb, and does not touch it again. He thinks, briefly and without hurry, of the festival planned 2 months hence when the neighborhood will help lift silt from the lowest steps. He will chalk a note tomorrow to mend the large baskets, to tie new hand loops in the hulling ropes, to ask the weaver for 2 lengths of strong jute. That is work for a brighter hour. For now he keeps to the few tasks that belong to the quiet: wicks, water, edges, notes. He sits, as planned, after the 5th pebble. Above him the portion of sky framed by the steps has turned richer, almost blue-black. A star lies directly between 2 opposite stairs, perfect and unlikely. He lines it with the point of the bell rope, a habit learned from sailors who sometimes come to the well and speak of using buildings to test the night's steadiness. The star holds a little to the left, then returns. The air will stay even till dawn. Hands folded, he lets the lamps bloom and dim with their slow breath. He feels the coal of the stone reach through his shawl into his back, not unfriendly, simply exact. His eyes find the faint ripples that fan away from the bucket rail where a tiny drip remembers a knot. He will turn the rope later to move the knot to dry. The mind catalogues, the body rests. After a time the mortar gleam dulls to matte, and the newest mark on the depth pillar looks older by an hour. He rubs the chalk once with the pad of his finger to soften its edges. He cups 1 lamp to take it down a step, then another. The light follows him like a tame bird moving from post to post. He is not closing yet. He is guiding brightness to where it is most needed for the last circuit. In the corner by the lowest stair he leaves a cloth-wrapped packet for the morning, a few pebbles free of grit, a folded leaf to use as a funnel, the reed with its cut tip nested in a small shell. These small arrangements please him. They make the next day begin in the right key, even if someone else opens the well before his feet arrive. He stands again and smooths his palms over his forearms, as if combing the day from the hairs. The well breathes. The lamps answer. The rope waits in its good silence. He takes 3 slow steps toward the pulley and feels, in the soles of his feet, the full patience of the stone, how it drinks, how it remembers, how it accepts his hand's small grammar of care. He answers that patience with his own. He lowers the bucket again, not for need, but to let the rope learn smoothness in its groove. The leather lip meets the surface with a round kiss. A twist of wrist turns the bucket so it drinks without fuss. He draws it up hand over hand, letting the hemp slide across his palm in a steady rhythm he could keep in his sleep. When the bucket clears the sill, he tips a slow stream into the small channel that feeds a row of jars set into the stair. These jars are for visitors who come late or early, when the town taps are still. He tops each one, wipes its rim with a clean strip of cotton, and rests a saucer over the mouth to keep moths from visiting. On the upper landing he keeps a tray of small things that make the work kind, a folded cloth, a sliver of soap, to spare wicks, the stub of chalk, a reed pen wrapped in string, a thumb-sized pot of soot ink thick as jam. He uncaps the ink and writes a single line on the plaster where he keeps his nightly simple record. The marks are more feeling than mathematics, a small curve for air even, a short vertical for draw gentle, a dot for no leaf fall. The ledger in the daytime office holds the numbers proper. This wall is the well speaking in his hand. You the south stare. Ronald gives a faint sigh. He bends and listens. The sound is no harm, only water remembering a corner too sharply and chattering a little as it passes. He lifts a wedge of baked clay from his pouch and slips it under the edge of the lip. The sound turns to a round murmur. He nods. This is much of the work, not to stop a thing, but to change its shape until it moves politely. From the shadow beyond the arch comes a shuffle and the soft clink of metal. An old woman steps into lamplight, a brass lotta in one hand and a cane in the other. She gives him a greeting that is more breath than word. He bows his head and sets the bucket to fill her pot. While it rises, he moves a low stool to the first landing. She sits without asking. This is the arrangement every time. He pours with care, waiting for the slight lift of her fingers that means enough. She folds a coin into his palm, not for the water but as thanks for the stool and the steadiness. He will put the coin, as always, into the jar for wick cotton, oil, and rope. When she leaves, he watches her steps until the cane's tap fades. He returns the stool to its place beside a carved pillar, whose base carries faint chisel flowers worn smooth by many shawls. He rubs a corner of the base with his thumb, not to clean, but to greet. A well is not only water and stone, he thinks. It is a long conversation in one place. He draws from a shallow box a coil of fine line-twisted cotton, almost thread. To the end he ties a small weight, no heavier than a bean carved from bone. He dangles this weight where a swirl sometimes hides dust along the sill of the lower steps. The line trembles, then stills. When he lifts it, a soft gray bloom marks where silt is planning to gather. He brushes with a whisk until the bloom is gone. This makes tomorrow's sweeping easier. It is the old lesson of all caretaking: do a small thing early, and the large thing later will not ask to be large. A moth meets a lamp and circles once too close. He cups his hand and pinches the wick lower. The flame becomes a patient dot. In the near dark the water shines more plainly. He lets the lamp breathe and then wakes it again with the pick, trimming away the carbon tongue that would smoke the niche above. He keeps the sooty crumbs for the ink pot. Nothing leaves the well without purpose if purpose can be found. Near the fourth landing an ancient crack shows a pale seam right through the carved geometry. He checks it nightly. His method is simple: a sliver of line paste smooth across the hairline and left to rest while he works elsewhere. When he comes back, the paste will tell him the tale. If the seam is wider, the paste will have sunk and darkened. If the seam is quiet, it will hold its shallow line and keep white. Tonight the paste holds. He breathes easier without thinking about it. He wipes the test away with a damp cloth and leaves the stone to its long patience. Every quarter hour, though, he no longer needs the watch to know, he steps to the garden side window where the channel slips under a small gate of stacked bricks. He lifts one brick, feels the push, counts heartbeats to 5, and settles the brick back. This allows a sip into the orchard basin beyond, enough for roots to speak of rain in dreams. The old gardeners taught him this. Do not feed the garden like a storm, feed it like a thoughtful cloud. A ripple near the water stair tells him the frog is awake. The frog has lived here 2 seasons. He has seen it as a pearl, then as a coin, now as a small green thumb. It takes an insect and settles again under the lip where water falls in a slender string. He watches the circle widen and fade. He knows by such circles whether the best place to draw is here or a handspan to the left. Tonight the left is better. He makes the adjustment without announcing it to himself. He remembers, as he straightens, the way the old keeper would teach with puzzles. Why do we lower the lamp when the wind is low? The old man would ask. As a younger man he had answered with pride, to save oil. The old keeper had smiled and said, because the well looks better that way. Now he understands. The eye rests, and the hands grow sure when light lies where it should. He returns to the top landing and opens the small cupboard with the wooden door that sticks a little at the warped corner. Inside rest the things that want to sleep. The spare horsehair brush, a small tin of wax for rope ends, a packet of chalk wrapped in blue paper, the reed pen, the soot ink in its pot. He dips the pen and writes on a scrap of smooth shard the date and a note that means only something to him. Night in equal mind. The shard will go into the larger book tomorrow. He draws the broom through the steps once more, very lightly, not to clean, but to hear the sound of the bristles on stone. The sound is smooth now, without the grit that pestered an hour ago. He takes this as the well's good night. At the far corner of the top landing a little hive of bees has made a temporary shelf behind a loose stone. They do no harm. They come and go like careful guests. He checks their flight line and makes a mental mark to ask the mason for a patch when the swarm moves on. He sets a shallow saucer of water on the sill for them, propping a twig across so they will have a place to stand. This may seem unusual today, but in older towns, keepers were often caretakers not only of water but of any small life that chose the cool and the quiet. A well had to be a kind neighbor. He sits again, not because the pebbles have told him to, but because his body asks. The air at this hour is round with silence. Faint street sounds ride the stone and soften. The lamps lean toward finishing. He waits with them, letting their glow shrink to a small honey color. He could pinch them now, but he prefers to close with a final circuit, letting each niche know it has been seen. He rises, takes the pick, and moves step, breath, lamp, step, breath, lamp until only the door lamp remains. At the door he pauses and looks back. The geometry recedes into a calm dusk. The water, half lamp and half sky, holds a gentle coin of light. He pulls the door lamp lower with a practiced pinch, leaving a shy blue in the stone. His hand finds the bell rope, not to ring but to feel the new splice hold. He draws the wooden door toward its hook but leaves it open a finger's width. A keeper never closes the night abruptly. He lets dark enter like a guest who knows the way. He smooths his shawl, sets the bucket upright with the handle folded down, and rests the coil of rope so the next hand will find no snarl. He breathes once more with the well's slow breath. Then, with the quiet he has collected laid evenly along his shoulders, he steps to the threshold and listens one last time for the voice of the water. He does return before the sky knows its color. The lane to the well is cool against his soles. Dust quiet, houses still folded in themselves. At the door he feels the wood with his knuckles the way a potter tests a rim. It answers with a soft, even note. He lifts the latch. The night has thinned, but not left. Lamps show only memory one breath of smoke where a wick fell asleep without fuss. He steps in and stands until his eyes learn the blue. The water is a darker sky set into stone. Its surface holds a faint oval of the doorway's pale, the mark of the world beyond. He fills his lungs and lets the air out slowly. This is how he measures the walls waking by the length of that first breath, and how it fits into the room. At the tool niche he lifts the broom and strokes each tread once, light as a palm across cloth, encouraging whatever dust collected in the last hours to gather where it can be taken. On the second landing a line of fine sand has arrived like a polite visitor. He draws it to the edge and into his pan. The weight is nothing, the gesture is the thing. At the third stair he touches the death stick. The notches are simple. His father carved them, his father's father set the first. He lowers the stick and lifts it straight, letting water read it. The mark shows a finger less than the high of last week, a finger more than yesterday at dawn. He wipes the stick and notes the measure on the waxed shard with the reed pen. The numbers will go to the day book in their proper order. For now he keeps them like a small tune under the tongue. He moves to the deep landing and washes his hands in a bowl he keeps for this purpose alone. The water is taken from the well each evening and returned each morning. He believes the well recognizes its own. The bowl of unglazed clay drinks little as always. It is content with that. He dries his hands on a cloth smooth so often that it feels like river stone. From a pouch, he takes the small tin of wax. He warms a fingertip on his lamp pick and rubs the wax into the rope's cut end where the strands begin to fray. Rope is a language. It listens to how it is finished. He twists the fibers back into themselves, makes a neat cone, and presses. The shape holds. He sets the coil down so it will not learn a kink. The air at the water's skin is 1 degree warmer than the air at the third step. He knows this without thinking. It has always been so in this season. When the monsoon has just said goodbye, the stone keeps a little heat for a while, easy as a scarf left on a shoulder. He lays his palm where the ledge meets the wall. The line is sound. Lime mortar remembers a careful hand. He smiles though no one sees. From beyond the arch a single bird marks the horizon with a small, questioning note. He answers by turning the door lamp up 1 grain. Stone brightens a little, and the geometry, those long triangles, those patient squares, begins its slow work of catching day. He knows where the first beam will travel, from the third niche on the east to the second on the south, a clean passage across a 90-degree thought. Someone planned this long ago with string, chalk, plumb, and calm hands. He thanks them in his heart each morning. A footfall on the upper stair. He lifts his head. It is the potter's boy, the one with elbows like reeds. The boy carries 2 shallow jars the color of toasted bread. He sets them on the upper landing and gives a small bow. For the school, the boy says. The keeper nods. We will fill them and let them settle. He guides the boy down the top flight, shows him where to stand so his shadow does not trouble the water. The boy watches the bucket rise as if the rope were a spell. The keeper tilts water into each jar into pourings, letting the clay drink, then drink again. He teaches without explaining, the pause, the lean, the small circle with the wrist that keeps the ripple from running up the wall. When the boy leaves, the keeper rests the dipper on its nail. He checks the frog's place. A single eye watches, then accepts the keeper's business as unworthy of commentary. In a niche where pilgrims sometimes leave tiny offerings, yesterday's flower has turned the color of paper. He lifts it, breaks it between fingers to make it small, and lets it fall to the garden at the threshold. Even this goes where it can become something else. He opens the cupboard and takes out the sooting. With the reed pen he writes on the scrap, depth finger plus, draw steady, air easy, frog faithful. His script is neat but not fussy. He learned neatness from the office book, not the wow, which cares more for rhythm. He sets the shard aside to dry. The reed pen goes back into its string. He checks the tin of wicks, counts what remains, and decides to cut to more from the cotton hank. The blade is dull. He stones it on the step as his father taught, a figure eight soft as breathing, until the edge remembers what it is. He trims and twists, making slim tubes that will drink oil as they should. He sets them in the tin with quiet pride. A woman arrives, a vendor who sells greens near the school. She brings her own brass vessel polished with the inside of her sari. They exchange 2 words only, her name and his greeting. He fills, wipes the lip, and waits for her nod. She leaves her coin. He does not watch her count her steps as she climbs. He looks instead at the wall and notices the faintest new stain where a drop climbed and dried. He rubs it with the damp cloth. The stone becomes itself again. He draws one last bucket, not for the jars, but for the stair. With a cupped hand he lets a ribbon of water run along the lowest treads, turning dust back into a skin the broom can understand. He sweeps with a final patience. If a friend asked why he takes this trouble when day will bring feet and sandals, he would say the well deserves to wake tidy. And he would think, as well, that his hands rest easier when the work closes in a circle. He climbs to the upper landing and looks through the garden window. The first sun has found the vine and turned one leaf to coin. He lifts the brick at the channel gate and lets a longer flow go into the orchard basin. The sound is round and low. He counts to 8 before settling the brick. An 8 count feels right in this light. Later in the season, he will choose 5. In the heart of heat he will choose 3 twice over. These choices are not poetry, he tells himself, though they sound like it. They are habits shaped by watching. He returns to the doorway. The lane outside is gray becoming gold. A woman with a bundle of grass passes. She nods with her chin because both hands are busy with the day. He nods with his eyes because his hands hold the moment of finishing. He lifts the door lamp and touches its wick with the pick. The flame thins and replies with a little blue at its root. He sets the pick down, ponds both sides of the door, and pulls it toward its hook. He leaves it open a hand's width now. In another breath, he will open it fully. There is no hurry in that last widening. He ties the coil of rope with a loose knot that will untie itself in one pull. He places the bucket mouth down so no moth will find it a cave. He rests the broom on its nail and sets the pan beneath. He folds the cloth, lays it square. The cupboard closes with its usual opinion. He pats its edge and listens. It does not complain. He goes to the first step and sits one more minute because he can. The well sits with him. A fly thinks and goes. The frog shifts the weight of a thought. The water ranges a tiny wave into a small truth and gives it back to the stone. He stands, smooths his shawl, and lifts the ledge. Outside, the street has begun its soft music, ladles, pans, a trader's cough, the laugh of a child who does not know yet the shape of his day. He steps out and turns the key in the hasp. The lock accepts with a click that feels older than he is. He puts the key on its cord around his neck. It warms quickly to his skin. He walks toward the office to write the numbers in the day book and leave the night shard where it belongs. He will boil tea in a dented tin and hold the cup in both hands while the first warmth finds his fingers. He will think of the 8 count at the gate, of the frog under the lip, of the woman's brass vessel, of the first coin on the vine. He will think too of rope and wick, of chalk and lime, of stone that remembers water and water that remembers stone. The well, behind him, holds its quiet. It is ready for day and for the many feet that will ask their share. He does not need to turn to know this. He has tended the night until it opened into morning. And as the stair slips into daylight, and the first jars are lifted with 2 careful hands, we leave this cool geometry and its gentle keeper, and drift toward another corner of the past where steady work and soft sounds keep ordinary life stitched together.